This is the Danger Close podcast, Beyond the Books with me, Jack Carr. Welcome to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. My guest today is my friend Eli Kfoury. Eli was born in Lebanon, immigrated to this country in the 80s, and worked his way to the highest echelons of special operations. An incredible guy, has done so much for this country. Always enjoy talking to him, and it is an honor to call him a friend. So now, without further ado, Eli Kfoury. Dude, let's go into some of your background.
Let's do it.
It is so unique.
Let's fix the world's problems.
And so awesome. I mean, your upbringing is, it's so cool that I put it in Savage Son for those that are going to pay attention here. But it's so unique. Take us through some of what it was like to grow up where you did and then travel to get to this country and how all that worked out.
Absolutely. So first off, thanks for having me on, brother. It's always great to see you and catch up. And it's so awesome to see the success you've achieved, man. I'm so proud of you. Keep crushing. So I was born in Beirut, Lebanon. We lived in an area called Ashrafiyeh, which is like a Maronite or Christian area on the northern parts of Beirut. And as you know, being a student of world history at the time I was born and growing up in the mid 70s and early 80s, it was civil war and lots of terrorism happening. Obviously, the Marine Corps barracks bombing. You had, some agency guys get picked up off the street and on and on and on. Not good stuff. And then ultimately being in a Christian area, surrounded by various factions of Muslim, entities, if you will, fighting. We were easy targets. So it was just indiscriminate shelling into where we lived. Mortars, rockets, you name it, gunfire. I remember some really magical moments growing up, going to the beach and being in the mountains and the Bekaa Valley and just Lebanon. It's like San Diego. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful country. And I hope maybe one day, it can be again. But obviously when I was growing up, that wasn't the case. My mother was Swedish, so blonde hair, blue eyes, stuck out like a sore thumb. I ended up being her interpreter essentially, and going out in town to grab stuff from the little stores like the Butcher or whatever, because it wasn't too safe for her to be out and about. My dad was a commercial airline pilot. He was a flight engineer on 747. So he was gone quite a bit, for international routes, obviously. And so I was, so to speak, the little man of the house. And, I had some amazing cousins that are like older brothers to me and obviously uncles, great family, tight knit. And we did what we needed to do to take care of each other and for us children to have as normal a childhood as possible in those circumstances. And I remember a lot of great memories, and obviously there's some really I won't say traumatic, but obviously you've grown up in a war, and the things you and I have experienced overseas, we know what that looks like. And to imagine growing up in that obviously comes with its own set of hurdles. But you learn to adapt and you keep pushing through. And I feel like parts of that experience are what gave me the mindset I needed to do the things that I've done in life. So I'm very grateful and thankful for that. Ultimately, our house was, hit or very close to being hit by some mortars. And I was actually, I was a little terror, as you can imagine. You probably the same. I got into everything. If my mom said, don't jump out that window into the trees outside, I'd be like, challenge accepted. I'm going to go do some crazy stuff. But I had taken apart my sister's high chair and I was holding, part of it. And mortar had gone off or something outside it, enough to shake the place. And I went tumbling down the stairs and the chair leg went through my face, literally just missed the teeth, went right through my cheeks. And my mom, a long time back had been like a nurse's aide before she became a Pan Am stewardess. And so because of the fighting, we couldn't go to the hospital. So she just literally scotch taped my face back together. And then when my dad got back, I think it might've been that day or maybe a few days later, we essentially were like, okay, we're out of here. And, got on a 747 cargo plane with some other families and flew out of the country.
Wow. Are your earliest memories, had things deteriorated like when you were born? Or do you have stories of how it was prior to things deteriorating? Did people talk about how things used to be? I mean, it was Paris of the Middle East type of a situation back then before things started to deteriorate. Do you have any memories of that before shelling began, the fighting began?
Absolutely. Again, it's much like San Diego, big, beautiful green trees, mountains. Obviously we have the Lebanese cedar, which is on the flag. And, I remember going with my cousins and climbing up those trees, and the pine cones and those things they were like footballs. So you'd get these awesome pine nuts and, the beach, like I said, just being out in the mountains with my cousins. And, it was great. And then, things started happening where even as a young kid, you learn to survive, and you understand that you either play a part to blend in, or you move with with haste and prudence. To like
Get off
check.
the X.
I remember when I first was attached to it was first a Marine Corps unit, but then when I eventually got to the teams, they're like, patrol, hey, this is a danger crossing. I'm like, dude, I know all about this stuff. I used to have to do this to go to school, like, so a lot of that stuff paid off in the long run. But I mean, certainly I remember a lot of beautiful things. And again, if you know any Lebanese people, they're like perpetual warriors, and that's all you hear. It's like, oh, it used to be so beautiful. And this and that. And, it's a shame. It just shows you what can happen when politics and outside entities, again, you're a student of geopolitics. You understand that you essentially in that neck of the woods have proxy wars between Iran and Saudi, and Lebanon just happens to be a battleground and close to Israel. So, a perfect breeding ground for a whole bunch of people to do nefarious things. And then the people just are along for the ride.
Yeah. Did that stuff carry over to school? Were there like factions in school? Or how old were you when you guys took
Yeah.
off? Do you have memories of that?
Yeah, no, in its school. So the school is French. It was, much like most of the Middle East and Africa, it was like England and France playing with who owned what, right? And so Lebanon had a lot of French influence, and so the schools. I was in a French-speaking school, and as a child, I don't recall a lot of that happening. I do remember, like our teachers would walk around with a rifle slung on their shoulder, and
Wow.
keep the kids safe, right? It was awesome. And that it tended to be because, with the children in those schools, you would have a mix, right? Representative of the society that lives around the place. So it was like everybody knew, regardless of what side they were fighting on and for what reason, like, don't mess with the school because I know kids in there.
Wow.
But of course, I'm sure, just like we saw in Afghanistan and Iraq, there are people that will stoop that low. But the teachers did their best. But I remember it as it was a pretty happy experience, if you will. Nothing bad from school. So,
Jeez. And then like the shelling, so you remember that one obviously that landed close, but do you remember a distinct time when there was like a shift? Kids are very perceptive when there's problems in the house, whether it's personal with parents or professional with one of the parents' jobs or something like that. You can sense the tension. I'm sure families did across the nation at the beginning of COVID when families got together, or like kids heard their parents whispering in the kitchen about, hey, I don't know if they're going to have this job tomorrow, or, just worrying about all these different things when everything was so uncertain in like March, April of 2020. But do you remember like a shift when you were a kid as far as people getting more worried, your parents getting more worried, those conversations? Did you sense that as a kid, or were you just running around, jumping out of windows and climbing trees and, throwing pine cones and like, oh, what's happening? What was that explosion? Or were you like, did you sense that something was changing and that, hey, we might have to leave this place and my parents are acting a little differently? Do you have that sense?
yeah, for me, there was one specific moment where I remembered, like, so, okay, something's up here. Obviously, your parents will do all that they can to, in your familial unit, if you have a strong structure around you, will do all they can to make it normal, so to speak, for the kids, right? So that they don't have to deal with the stuff that the adults, like I have older cousins and, uncles that were, going out on patrols and stuff. And even still now to this day, a lot of them we don't talk about those stories. It's just something that happened, and they were doing their part to keep us all safe. But for me, I was on a walk with my uncle, and I had a little schnauzer, and we're walking along, and we come up to a couple guys with AKs, and with no warning, a dude just walks up and blasts my dog's head, and I'm holding on to the other end of the leash. And they essentially called us out as Christians, and he was like, "Get back to the rocks. You came out from under. Get out of here. You're next." And so my uncle is like, he scoops me up, and he's like, "Oliver got bit by a snake. Oliver got bit by a snake." And I'm like, "Hey, bro, I just saw that. Like that was no snake." So he was, even in that moment, he was trying to protect me and have me think that something happened to the dog of a more natural cause, if you will, not that some coward just blasted some kid's dog in the face. So that to me was like the first moment, and even seeing all the adults try to kind of like reframe that experience for me, worried about like me having damage or something from it. I don't know. It was reframed as this whole other thing. And I was like, man, something's going on here, And I think I was probably 5.5, 6 when that happened. And so I was old enough to understand, like you said, to be in tune with what's going on around me, and to have seen that obviously with my own 2 eyes. And, I just remember, like being in his arms and him, moving, running, and like telling me that the dog got bit by a snake, and he was screaming because we were both deaf, from the AK blast right up close. And I was just like, man, something's going on here. But yeah, that for me, that was the moment.
Yeah, that's certainly significant. What? Jeez, so they call in law enforcement a clue that something might be going on.
Yeah.
How long after that did you guys pick up and leave?
It was a few more years after that. I had family, aunts, and uncles that were here in the States on my mom's side as au pairs and things. So we were able to come visit, on some travel visas, but we could never stay. And then obviously with what was happening in Lebanon, immigrating from Lebanon at that time was damn near impossible. So, it took some time to be able to get out of the country. Like I said, that one instance with, putting my sister's high chair through my cheek and tumbling down the stairs was kind of all my mom and dad needed at that point to say like, okay, it's time for us to get out of the country. And so, we went to Sweden. My mom's family obviously is there, and eventually came to the East Coast of the US where my mom's sisters were. And that also facilitated my dad in his career being a transcontinental pilot to be near some of the big airports on the East Coast. So, JFK, BWI, LaGuardia were kind of and Newark were the ones that he flew out of the most of. So that's kind of the area that we eventually settled. But by the time all that was said and done with, I was, just shy of 9 years old, I think, by that time.
Wow. And then, so when you guys make that trip to Sweden, what would you take things with you? Are you packing up like a move, or you like grab suitcases, we're going, and we're not telling anybody we're not coming back, but we're not going back? Like, did you know you weren't coming back, or did you like have movers? And was it a normal thing, or was it like, hey, pack one bag, we're going to the airport, we're saying we're taking a trip, but we're not coming back to this place? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, no, from what I recall, it was just like, hey, let's get some stuff and we're getting out of here. Eventually, in time, I do remember in the US, like having some furniture that looked familiar. And I think just with my dad traveling, especially when he was flying cargo routes, he was able to, get some things. But, all credit to my mom and dad. I couldn't even imagine what that must be like, just picking up my kids and going and coming to a place and starting with nothing. But that's the beauty of this country that I think is lost on most of the people that are born here, Yeah,
unfortunately. Yeah. That appreciation certainly is not there in a large segment of the population. How long were you guys in Sweden then before you
not long.
made it here?
Yeah, not long. It was more like a, pit stop.
Okay. So not long enough to go to school and get settled there in order to pick up and go again. So the plan was always we're going to go to Sweden. We're going to turn around and head to the United States as soon as we can.
Yep. So once that was, approved, I remember, and I think I've shared this with you before, but, we landed in JFK, I believe it was, or LaGuardia. It was somewhere in New York. I want to say JFK. And not to date us, but that was back in the days where you and I remember walking down steps out of an airplane, not onto a jet bridge. And so, we land on the runway, we're walking down the steps and I haven't even talked to my dad about this in a long time. I wonder if he even remembers, but it was like he was waiting for my foot to actually touch the tarmac. And as soon as my foot touched, I feel this big, gorilla mitt on my shoulder and squeeze. And he puts his, mouth right down to my ear. And he's like, don't ever forget this step. And then that was it. And I was like, okay, this is serious. Like, where are we? It's America. Man. It's amazing. But that stuck with me. And then throughout my entire childhood, my mother and father just inculcated it within me that, this was somewhere really special. And it was going to, provide for our family. Like, unfortunately, Lebanon was unable to.
And so many people left Lebanon during those days. That's why there's so many, Lebanese communities all around the world. So what did you do once you get to the U.S.? Now, are you go right into school, and do you feel accepted right away? Are you a little tentative? Like, what's it like as a 9-10-year-old to now be in a new country, coming from a place where you were getting shelled, and now you're in a place where that's not normal, not usually happening anyway, in most of the United States, and now you're not worried about that, and you're going to a new school. And how was your English at the time, and like what was that like?
Certainly some bumps in the road in the beginning. When I first moved here, I could speak Arabic, French, and Swedish, no English. And so, obviously at that point in time, what am I in, third or fourth grade, something like that, second or third grade. Anyway, I had to do like the summer kindergarten to learn English. And so I'm around toddlers, and my mother and father stopped speaking anything to me in the house but English. So, I was just an angry, pissed off little kid because, I couldn't effectively communicate with my mother and father. And in hindsight, that's something I always look back on as I moved into the health, side of things as a practitioner taking care of people. It just made me empathize with folks that have a difficulty communicating, because I feel like that's why so many of those folks get so upset, because they just get frustrated, right? And so that experience, again, I always try to reach back in my life on things to learn from and grow from. And as difficult as that was at the time, eventually it became very beneficial as far as my empathy level went, right? So, but at the time, I'm being talked to by teachers, my mother, father, everybody in English, and one day, I'm calling the teacher, some nasty name as a kid, like a cow. I didn't even remember what I said, but I heard this like, and I turn around, and there in the back of the room is my dad. And I was like, son of a biscuit, I'm going to have to learn English now, like I'm busted, but, so, I learned. My mom, I used to watch a lot of General Hospital as a kid.
A lot of people learn English from watching soap operas all around the world. It's an interesting how often I hear that.
Yes. Yeah, because I think, my mom, she was stay at home, but eventually, she had a really amazing entrepreneurial spirit, which I think is where I get a lot of that, stuff from. But she eventually started her own business in monogramming and embroidery, but was home, right? And so being around, she'd be like, here you go, dude, sit down and we're going to watch this show. And I didn't know what the heck was going on. I was just trying to pick up words and, really just dive in head first to get it as quickly as I possibly could, because obviously the school year is coming up. Then when school started, to answer like childhood stuff, I was in northern New Jersey, which is a predominantly Jewish area. Not that any of the kids understood or that I gave a damn, but I was, and I never even told my parents. I didn't want them to worry. I just sucked it up, because in my head, I was like, I've been through way worse than what these kids are doing to me. But I was harassed, bullied, called, Arab, camel jockey, sand, N-word, like you name it. And I think it was just, it's ignorance, right? When people are bullying or to me, the way I always looked at it is hurt people, right? And so there's something going on in that kid's life where, I'm going to be the projection of his feelings, whatever. So I never looked at that as representative of what America was. Even at a young age. My dad and mom would tell me, like, listen, there's going to be people here that because of where you come from, they might not treat you well. But that's not America. That's just that one person. And always be proud of where you've come from, your heritage, your culture. And don't be ashamed. Always hold your head up high. Treat people as you want to be treated, right? The age-old adage. So it certainly wasn't fun to get picked on, but what kid doesn't get picked on? Not saying that it's right, but we all know what bullying feels like, I'm sure, from school. Yeah. And so it was just something to deal with and move past. But it certainly wasn't fun in the beginning. And, being in love with the ocean, I was and skateboarding and all these things. I was like, man, America's cool. They've got these little boards with wheels on them. And, I can go surf in the ocean and I can do all this stuff. So I would dress like a skater surfer kid or whatever, but I was around people that wanted to wear, at the time it was like Benetton and, all these like fancy.
Well, you certainly are dating us now.
Yeah. I'm dating us, brother. But but all that comes, yeah. But anytime that you're, not like the rest of the crowd, you're going to be a focus. So I just learned to deal with it. But it was what it was.
Do you think that bullying part of it helped in some way to forge your path going forward into something where you could stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves?
Yeah, man. Again, really point. You're a sharp one, my friend. I always try to look at the things that I experienced, my history, right? Just like I like to study world history, much like yourself. I feel like unless you understand and get amongst those lessons and you try to dissect them and pull out the nuggets, whether it's a good experience and obviously the bad ones, I feel like you can really learn from those. I just want to move forward in life productively, right? And so part of that is always looking back on those experiences. And for me, my father was an airline pilot, but all of his family, all my uncles, older cousins, they were all doctors, surgeons, and so medicine was just something I grew up around, and it always intrigued me, the ability to save someone, right? And being the oldest sibling, one of the older cousins, as far as like the ones in my peer age group, if you will, I was always the one like, Elias, make sure all your brothers and sisters and cousins are safe and, go have fun. So I was always kind of put in that leadership role. And with that came a lot of, accidents, dirt bike jumps, we're going to build a jump across the river. And then when someone would, case the landing, I was the de facto medical person, because it was my responsibility to ensure I didn't get grounded forever, that, my brother, sister, or cousin could walk home. Right. So it always intrigued me. Like, it's fun to go be part of the action, but I always loved the extra responsibility of, now it's your turn to do your work, So that was always something certainly that was planted in my head from a young age.
And where did the love of the ocean come from? Do you remember those Lebanon, going to the beach there? Was there a fascination with the ocean, the water there, or did that come once you got to the United States? I mean, there's an awesome surfboard behind you right there. I want to ask about where you got that thing, but where did surfing and sailing and free diving and that love of the ocean come from?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, in Lebanon, we would go to the beach and, for me, the ocean does something to me in my soul. And I'm sure people that love to surf and free dive or fish or whatever it is can understand with that statement. It was almost like something too, where our families were trying to escape the realities of what was happening in Lebanon too. So it was always like an extra happy experience. It was super fun, just playing and frolicking around in the waves. And obviously it's in the Mediterranean, so it's not like we had surf breaks and stuff, but there were guys that free dove and spearfish. And, so I just, and that, those were the days too. Again, we're going to date ourselves again here, but Jacques Cousteau, and like that guy to me was a superhero, so I loved watching those shows. That was another thing of obviously we would see the French versions, but in America, the English version, it's just like, it's a whole nother world. And so it always intrigued me. And then as I grew, I realized it was, especially now, much like with archery, like we were talking about, it's just something where I can be so present in the moment, not worry about, the pain I'm in or business stuff or family stuff. Or it's just about, okay, I'm in the water right now. I've got to relax and breathe up before I kick down and go look for some fish or, whatever it is. And same with surfing, catching a wave, even if it's a junkie wave, it's the most fun thing ever, and obviously for us, we're always seeking, to get our heart pumping a little bit. So, the conditions can give you the things that you're looking for. Sometimes it just, to me, it's just always magical. I love, and every time is different, right? The ocean always changes. So, but yeah, once we got here in the States and, there was waves you could go surfing and I saw people surfing. I'm like, what is that? I have to do that. And sure enough, the first time I stood up on a surfboard, it was like, whoa, what have I been missing? Like, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life, but yeah.
Where'd you get the board behind you? That board looks killer.
Yeah. So that was a retirement present from
I was going to guess that.
The Amazing Long-Haired Admiral. So these are the two boards from the Endless Summer movie, both signed by the guys, right? So it's just little special boards there.
No way. That is amazing.
Yeah,
Too cool. Man, yeah, Jacques Cousteau, it's interesting. I haven't thought about this memory in a long time. Watching those shows, and we didn't have a pool, but like one of my friends did growing up at age like 5, 6 in there. And so I remember going to his house and going to that pool, but I remember we had to eat. Remember back in the day, you had to wait 2 hours or something like that. Like if you ate lunch, you had a chip and then you touched water somehow in that 2 hours, you were a goner. I remember having to wait and like they had like the clocked out, maybe it was 45 minutes, but somehow 2 hours popped in my head right there. But anyway, you had to wait a certain amount of time if you had any food as a kid in the 80s or otherwise, if you got in the water, you're done.
Yeah. You're going to drown or you're going to get a horrible flu.
Something. And so I remember pretending to be Jacques Cousteau or around, I remember thinking about those specials from back in the day, doing a breath hold down in this little pool, but I hadn't thought about that in a long time.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that. My teta or my grandmother, I used to joke, it was almost like she had this, what I called the 100 rule, like the air and the water had to equal over greater than 100 when added together before it was safe for me to touch the water,
Wow.
Because I was like, I don't care if I got to break ice and sit in the water. I love that too. I love being in the water. And so, she was always like, same thing, like, honey, you just ate. You have to wait an hour. I'm like,
exactly.
No, I don't. I'm not. It's not like I'm going to go swim Michael Phelps laps. I just want to go float in the pool.
I totally remember that from I haven't heard that in a long time. I think that went by the wayside. That's
yeah. Oh yeah.
That wisdom went by the wayside. Where did the sailing come in? Where did you start? Did you start sailing in high school, or when did you start doing that sort of a thing?
Yeah, so my uncle that lived in Annapolis had a beautiful little sailboat, and eventually got some bigger ones. But he enjoyed the steering portion and not the grinding and pulling of ropes. And so my cousins and I became the de facto slave crew.
Nice.
But in that, I really, really love sports or activities that are powered by nature in some way. Sailing was, aside from surfing, one of the first things I did where you feel free a little bit, right? Like an adventure. And again, being a kid, watching Jacques Cousteau and, reading history books about, the pirates and all the like early naval battles and all that, like it just, I thought, man, how cool would it be to get in a sailboat and just cruise around wherever I want to go? Obviously as a kid, you think those things. And now as I'm aging, I'm like, man, I need to jump on a sailboat and just go a trip. Yeah. And hope when I come back to shore, everybody's got their heads right. But no, I loved it. And then that got me into windsurfing. And so I could go a little faster and, be my own captain, so to speak. That became an expensive hobby because as I progressed, I want to do what's called bump and jump or wave sailing. And so I was breaking masts and booms and sails. And, when your biggest sponsor is your mom and dad and they're living on a budget, your sport goes by the wayside. So, I figured out ways to, I'll just become a windsurfing instructor and I can use the school's equipment. And, so it spawned that love in the wind. And then eventually that led to kiteboarding and foiling and, on and on and on. I just loved it.
It's
and eventually,
incredible.
Yeah. I got lucky, man. A lot of my buddies too that grew up in that world, much like with JD and the guys that like Jimmy now, right? You got these world-class athletes that are sailing rocket ships around, like the new foiling cats are amazing. But I was lucky enough to go work with a crew on what's called the GC 32, which is a 32-foot foiling boat, much like the F-50s, but instead of a rigid wing, it's a sail. And be their safety diver and part of their shore crew. So I got to be in and around it, got to get on the boat and grind a little bit, but I just love it, man.
Dude, that stuff. Yes, we're just in San Francisco Bay over the weekend watching the GP Sail finals, and that was amazing. I mean, watching Jimmy Spithill up there, it's cool to be able to reach out to him for sailing questions for the novels. But while we're out there we're in the chase boat out there, right there watching everything. It was super cool. But so there's windsurfers out there in San Francisco Bay, awesome flying. But then there are also those guys holding the whatever that thing is. So there's not is that it? You're just holding it. And then they're like moving it and they're jumping, like flying through the air. It was incredible. And I've seen that a couple times before, but we were out there like right next to them seeing that. And then they had these guys come flying by it looks like the Jetsons. What are those things that I keep meaning? I meant to come home and look it up. Yeah. They have this I think they had a little remote control in their hand, and they were and they have these bright helmets on so they don't get like whacked by something. And they were just like zipping around out there on these little like Jetsons, it reminded me of Back to the Future too, the hoverboard, except it's on the water. So they're foil. So what is that thing? What are they doing?
So it's a motorized foil. So at the bottom of the mast, right before the foil, there's essentially like a trolling motor. And so it allows them to have a joystick in their hand, turn up the prop. And once it's up on step and on foil, there's so little resistance. Like you said, it's like a magic carpet, a little Jetsons hovercraft. But
have you done that yet?
Yep.
That seems crazy. And some of those boats out there, like the Protectors out there, I mean, we had quad 300s on this Protector. So we're flying. And I could just imagine one of these little guys in his little helmet, I was like, oh my gosh, like at least with the other things, you have something that's like big that you can see, like even a windsurfer, pretty small, but you can still see that sail. You can see all these things and kind of, avoid, or they can avoid you, or I don't know, but these guys are just so small. It's like being on a skateboard, on the water, just zipping around, not even as big as, like a jet ski type thing. That's maybe a bright color that allows you to see them. Like it was, the only thing on them is this little tiny helmet that looks like a bobbing, maybe piece of styrofoam or trash if they go down. So anyway, that was interesting to see that. But the guys out there sailing, I mean, it was awesome seeing Jimmy race, and we'd seen him in the America's Cup in Bermuda and watched that. But this is a different deal, like Formula One, but for sailing. And what's so cool about this one is that America's Cup, hardly anybody can afford to race in the America's Cup because all that technology, and then there's so many like the different teams and how much money you can put in and how big your crew can get. There's a lot of things that can benefit a team that isn't necessarily based upon your ability to sail and your skill level. So it's amazing down to the number of containers you can have. It's all set. You can't have one more container than another team. It's all set. The amount of support crew you can have, nope, all set. So another team can't have an advantage because they have a bigger budget and they can put a few more, containers together with support crew or material or whatever it might be on there. They can't morph the technology. It's all the same. So now it's sailing again, even though there's a lot of technology, obviously, with those things. But it was really cool. It's a great concept, I think, like a Formula One concept, but for the water.
Yeah. And it makes sailing exciting for people that don't know sailing, right? There's part of me where I love the old 80s America's Cup races because it's all about strategy and, the chess of what they were doing up and down the course, right? But today, those boats, especially with closing speeds, like that crossing with, what was it, New Zealand and Italy, and, like three boats came to the same
We had
point.
Two crash in the final.
And two New Zealand hit, I think it was France or someone that was beside them, and so the speed and violence at which those boats move, I think, is appealing, right? And to have, like you said, a level playing field, so to speak, where it is going to come down to strategy and sailors. And unfortunately, we saw this weekend some less than favorable wind and one damn whale
The whale. That was
yeah.
amazing. Close the course for the whale. That
Oh
was
man, I was
pretty
like,
cool to see.
that was such a great race too. And Jimmy like just took the lead back right
I
at that
know.
mark. And then they're like, races off,
Whale.
there's a whale on the course. No.
Yep. Yeah, crazy. What I found out this weekend is that, they always used to tell us that, hey, I did the Escape from Alcatraz triathlon years and years ago. And I wanted to see if I could do it without training specifically for it, if just what I was doing for our job would allow me to do something like that. And it did, except for the bike. Like run was good, swim was good. Man, I got on that bike without having trained specifically for that. That was probably you probably need to train more specifically for that in that sort of a thing. But I remember, that, and then other times growing up that, hey, there's no great whites. They don't come in to the bay because it's too shallow out there, and they don't come in. Yeah, guess what? When they started tagging these things, they're all over the place in there.
Oh yeah.
Jeez.
Oh yeah.
So that was fun to talk about this weekend.
Oh yeah. Part of my college experience, I was a marine biology major because of Jacques Cousteau.
Nice.
Yeah, I had a really interesting mix, aeronautical engineering with a minor in marine biology and all my pre-med recs. So I figured I could design cool airplanes, but I could also scuba dive on the side,
Awesome.
And in that, I focused mostly on what they call ichthyology, which is rays and skates, cartilaginous fishes. And so sharks, and that was part of the reason why I got into free diving and spearfishing, to see sharks. I think they're the most amazing animals. When you see them move through the water, they're so, so beautiful and perfectly designed for what they do. And so, you talk about the great whites there, same thing. I was like, man, I'd like to do that swim from Alcatraz one year. And then, I'm researching just as I would want to understand about the tides, the currents, how to swim, if there's swim clubs there. I actually reached out to some of the swimming clubs and, I asked like, hey, sharks, sea lions, like, oh no, we don't worry about any of that stuff. And then like an hour after I got off the phone with this guy, a buddy sends me a video of, I think it was at Alcatraz, and it was like a tour boat. People were walking down the stairs to go back to the tour boat, and this dad is like filming his family, and right beside the boat, this massive great white breaches and splashes, and everyone's like, oh my God, a shark. I'm like, yeah, cancel that swim, not doing that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great white breeding ground right off the coast. I mean, it would make sense that a couple would come in every now and again.
Yeah.
Wild. So you do high school, and when do you decide that, hey, the military is my path? Are you thinking about that in junior high and high school and then college? Because I know you went there first before you joined. So what was that path like to join the military?
Yeah, honestly, like I said, it was just inculcated with me from a young age. I knew, and my dad had pretty much said, like, you're going to give back to this country one day for our family because it's given us everything, right? So I always knew that was going to be part of my path. I just didn't know when. And actually, when I was in high school, I did all of the stuff for the Naval Academy and had the appointment letters. And at the last minute, right before you're supposed to show up and I didn't get my commission, but like you're waiting for your commission and getting ready for plebe summer and all this stuff. And I was like, Dad, I think I just want to go to Maryland and play lacrosse and just have a normal college thing, and then I'll join afterward. And so that's what I did. I went to Maryland. And it was funny, after Maryland, I'm like, hey, I joined the Navy. My dad was like, dude, we could have saved so much money. Like, you should have just gone from the get-go, But while I was in college, my roommate, it's kind of funny. He introduced me to two things. One was Prince as a musician. He was like the biggest Prince fan, and gave me appreciation how amazing that guy actually is as a musician, or was, unfortunately. But then he also loved history, military history specifically. And he had this book, and I want to say it was called Doc. And it was about a SEAL corpsman or HM in Vietnam, and his tales of the stuff they were doing. And it was light on medicine, if you will, and more on, the riverine ops that those guys got to do back then. And just it hooked me. I was like, man, how sick would it be to join all the things I want to be in: the water, medicine, and, go play G.I. Joe with my buddies. I do that in the woods now, like sign me up, So I knew that was probably the direction I was going. And so, my mother, unfortunately, was battling cancer. And so I was going back and forth from school to home a lot. Started struggling in school towards the tail end of it because my mind was just not there. It was just like, my mom, who we were really, really close. So a bit of a struggle, obviously, to go through that, and obviously pales in comparison to what she was going through every day. But nonetheless still challenging. And in one of those, like I literally was on my way home, and I pulled over. I'm sorry, on my way back to school from home, I pulled over at this, like a shopping center, just to, catch my breath, get my head right, and wipe away some tears. I was just sad. My mom was hurting. It's just tough to see someone you love suffer. And lo and behold, I look up and there's the recruiting office. So I'm like, oh, let's go talk to these guys and just see. So of course you walk in, and there's, like the Army poster and the Air Force and the Marines and then the Navy. And of course the Navy poster is, at the time I didn't know what it was, but it was all SEAL stuff, right? So you see a guy like skydiving and coming out of the water with his gun, and like just his mask with the rifle barrel. I'm like, that's what I want to do. Sign me up. So, I'd go in there and you probably joined under the same thing. It was called the dive-farer contract at the time, Navy Special Operations. I don't think SWIC was a thing yet, but it was, you could sign that and go be SEAL, diver, or EOD, whatever part of the Navy SOF you wanted to do. So my thing, I didn't know it at the time, but I had signed the line to be a dive-farer, but also the HM, the medical contract, because I had mentioned to the guy that that's what I wanted to do, which was kind of funny because in boot camp, I had also read this Green Beret book, and I really loved the clandestine nature of what it was those guys do, as well as the cultural aspect of language and learning where they were operating and how.
Do you remember the book?
No, I don't. I think it was called Green Faces or something like that. I'll have to find it. Now you challenge me, I don't have to find that book. But, I was like, man, that would be kind of cool too. So in boot camp, it's like in your third or fourth week where you go pick your job, your rating. Yeah. I'm all excited, like, man, I'm gonna find out about this linguist thing, and I'm just gonna try to knock out it. And I get to the desk, and the guy's like, name and social. He puts it in, and he's like, you already have a job. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, you're HM. What's that? And he's like, it's a corpsman. Oh, okay, I'm cool with medical. Yeah, sounds good. And then that was it. And so here we are.
Wow. So you didn't even do the tryout part. You just were like, yes, sir, Corpsman, off, back to more push-ups or making my bed or folding my clothes.
Yeah. No, at the time, it was like, I was a bit bummed because I was like, man, I already have so many languages I can pull from. And obviously to me, anyway, the writing's on the wall that I'm very much likely going to go back to the places that I grew up and work. Yeah. I got the right complexion and the language, and, I'll fit right in. So I thought that would be super cool to do. Right. But ultimately I'd signed, and just like every other, everybody's got the boot camp recruiter story. Yeah. I went back to my little bunk bed that night, like, man, when I get back home, I'm going to go see that guy. Like, how could you?
Seriously. Oh man.
Yeah. But hey, man, everything happens for a reason. And, I was like, man, medical. Okay, cool. I'll dive into that from the jump. I had this whole plan. Like I was going to go do the cool stuff, and I was going to learn languages, and then I was going to do medical stuff, but no, it was medicine right up front.
So when I signed up, same thing, dive-farer program, went in, but there was some sort of a corpsman component to it. And, and I'd done all my research as much as you could back then before the internet anyway. So I knew about dive-farer program. I knew all that, but I didn't know about this corpsman thing. And I went in and they said, hey, the only thing we have open for dive-farer is corpsman, which is not true. But I was like, okay, hey, as long as I can get to the team, as long as I can get my shot to try out, that's all I want. Mm-hmm. Just my shot to try out in boot camp. I don't want to get to boot camp and not be allowed to try out. So, sign away. Of course, looking back, that was a complete scam with the dive-farer program. You just sign on for 6 years, and everybody got a chance to try out if they wanted to at boot
camp.
But that's the military. Funny? That's your introduction to the military. Welcome to government service. But I remember that, and I was like, okay, corpsman. I'm like, well, I guess I don't know if I really have the aptitude for that. But I remember the guy was like, the teams need corpsman. And I'm like, Roger that. Then I'm your guy, and I'm still about the same, my medical knowledge, as from calling you to ask you things, small hole, small patch, big hole, big patch, but I was like, okay. But then when I got to boot camp and got to that guy's desk, I think the way he phrased it was like, gave me some sort of an opening. Like, wait, you mean I don't have to be a corpsman? And I was like, and I think they gave me a list, and I'm like, SEAL source ratings. And I was like, oh, intelligence specialist. That sounds awesome. That's like James Bondy. I'm reading all this stuff. Anyway, boom, that. And so off I went after part of that dive-farer program, try out, pass, go to IS school at Dam Neck, Virginia, and then right to Bud. So for whatever reason, that that worked out for me.
Looking back, hindsight, knowing what we know now, in those early days when you have, people that you think are, they're talking to you straight, they're not trying to pull anything over on you. You're like, okay, yeah, sure. But now understanding the way it works, like those guys got to meet quotas. They got to put people in the right, they need cogs over here, not over here. So there were a couple times, like for me in boot camp, when I, as part of the diafarer thing, once you pass that first SEAL PT test, like we would get to go work out with them in the mornings, aside from our boot camp stuff. And then it continued on in Corps school. So it was like, at the time, it was like the precursor to what became known as pre-buds, right? And so we were just always PTing, and our guy, our dive motivator was an HM1 SEAL. And looking back on it, years later, I'm like, that guy was just grumpy and hated the teams, and he did me dirty, because when I was sitting with him at his desk, he was like, what do you want to do, man? And I was like, well, obviously I think that the action part of this job is amazing. And I want to, if I could just go to do Hell Week, like, I just want to know if I can do it. It wasn't so much about the job, because I knew the medical thing was most important to me. Sign me up. And he's like, well, it sounds like you really want to know medicine. So if I were you, what I would do is go to MARDIV first, like go be with the Marines, earn the title doc from those guys. You will do more medicine than you ever will do with the teams, and then come back to the teams. And I was like, okay, like whatever you say, right, bro. So, I still had to do the PTs and stuff. I go to Corps school. And then afterward, and he was like, make sure you finish at the top of your class, and you'll always get to pick where you go. So it's like, okay, check, Roger, check. So I'm always getting at the top of the class, so I can be the first guy to pick orders. And lo and behold, out of Corps school, they say, where do you want to go? And I was like, first MARDIV, and off I went. So,
man, so I mean, your path now, looking back, it seems like a very natural path, even though needs of the Navy and recruiters and all the rest of it, misunderstanding or not understanding what's going on quite yet, because you're brand new with the whole thing. But your path into medicine seemed like that was the right path for you. And thank goodness, because what you did during your time in the military to save so many lives, so many of our friends' lives, and experience what you did. And I mean, it's just incredible, your story, what you did for everyone. But it seems like that was the right path. Like, for whatever reason, it like that made sense. So now you're in the Navy, but you're with the Marines. And how is that?
It was awesome. Yeah. So again,
this is pre-September 11th right now.
Pre-September 11th. We're in 97. It's a while back. I show up at Pendleton. I'd obviously gone through Corps school, and then we had to go to Field Medical Service School, which is kind of like your infantry medical school, to go be a medic with the Marines. And I show up, and I have orders for first MARDIV, and it's kind of funny. I was actually talking with a buddy from work the other day about some of the places we've stayed after he just came back from a trip. And I checked in it was like a Friday night, super late. I land in San Diego. I get driven to Camp Pendleton. Now what I know to be a very grumpy sergeant, because I disturbed his movie watching while he was on watch. This guy literally is like, looks at my paper. He's like, follow me, takes me to this building that should have been condemned. Humans should not have been living in there. And so it was me and there was two young Marines in there. And, it's like a bunk room of hundreds of bunk beds, and just, it's disheveled and dirty. And there's what I think is asbestos. And I'm just like, okay, I'll stay in here. Didn't tell us where chow was, like where we could get water. You turn on the faucet in the bathroom and it's like coming out rust colored. I'm like, I'm not drinking that. I'll just, in my head, honestly, I thought at the moment, I was like, okay, I know I have a lot of discomfort ahead in my career because I want to do the special operations thing. Like, this is my first test. I'm going to be thirsty and hungry all weekend until Monday so the next day the sun comes up, go traipse around base with these two Marines and find food and water. But Monday we check in, and we're with our PSD folks, and in those places it's all Marine personnel folks, not Navy. And they're like, you've been recoded to FSSG, not MARDIV. FSSG is Field Service Support Group. That's like the logistics element behind MARDIV. And I was like, no, there's a mistake here. And he's like, hey man, it is what it is. Like, that's where you got to go, show up there. And if there's an issue, like maybe you can work it out down there. So of course, being a young guy, I knew enough to know that like, if I call my detailer, I'm going to nothing is happening. He's going to say, sorry, dude, like deal with it. So I show up at this place, and it's essentially like a warehouse of medical supplies. And to your point about having been to the right places, I knew I was like, man, okay, this sucks, but I'm going to have a lot of time to train and get ready for the stuff that I want to do. And my chief told me there that, hey, within 12 months, like you can see if there's other people that want to swap orders with you, because there's likely going to be a corpsman from Mardiv who's just smoked, and he'll want to come sit in this warehouse and you can switch up. So I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to learn this stuff. And ultimately it helped me understand logistics, supply chain, money, funding, all that stuff that then enabled me to really perform well down the road where I eventually got, right? Because there's much more autonomy for you to be in charge of everything, all aspects of your medical responsibility. So that experience was huge, but it didn't keep me like resting, right? So 4 months in, there was an opportunity to deploy, to go on a Westpac and be part of the element that goes. And I was like, yo, sign me up. I'm out of here. Like put me in. And in that, there was an EOD detachment, and those guys got attached to a force recon platoon of Marines. Again, they needed a corpsman, and I was like, I'm your guy. So I eventually got to, the special operations component, if you will, and had an awesome time, man. Those Marines were fantastic. Eventually earned the title Doc. Once you get called that as a young corpsman with the Marines, it's something special. And then those guys would joke. I was shown the dark side when we married up to a platoon of SEALs from San Diego for our train up, and I was like, I think what these guys is doing is better. Because I remember the first time. Did you ever go to that range in Pendleton where we had the shoot houses and everything?
Oh yeah, many
so
times.
We're sitting up there. It's Marines, so like my sleeves are nice and tight and crisp, and my camis are looking good before you're allowed to change into your flight suit, because we wore those Nomex flight suits with our kit and had the MP5.
Yeah, back in the day, so did we.
We're sitting at the range around their tables, getting loading rounds and mags, and these 2 15-pack vans drive up the road hauling ass. And our gunny's like, who are these guys? And sure enough,
he should know already.
Oh yeah. And the first thing I see is like the driver door pops open, and I see like Ugg boots step out and like cut off camis and a t-shirt. And I'm like, whoa, those guys are doing it right. Like, who are these guys? And ended up obviously befriending all those.
That might have been my platoon.
Yeah, maybe. But I was just in my head, I'm like, why can't we be more relaxed like those guys? And when it's time to show up and do work, they're just as turned on as we are. Like all this extra, stuff, like leave it, and no disparagement meant at all, but leave it to the conventional military with younger guys where they need to breed that, compliance, if you will. And for us, like if you're going to be in special operations, I always thought like, don't you want me thinking outside of the box and being an individual and, like being
what happened to all that?
For myself? Yeah. But so anyway, that was my first exposure to the teams.
Oh man. Yeah. I remember those ranges, that was cool because they had the shoot house, and then they had the part that was built like a ship up above with the hatches and all that stuff. And then they had the ranges down below. And what was it? Long rifle? Was that who you had to call into? Was that you had to call long rifle is the name of to go hot down there. So anyway, that was cool. That was fun going up there. I love going to those, going up to those
dusty,
ranges.
But great.
Yeah, it was really cool. I have great memories of working up there. I don't think I did after September 11th. I think that was all pre-September 11th work up there in my first 2 platoons. But so you get that glimpse, and then what happens? How do you make your way over to NSW? And do you do that before September 11th or after?
It was before. So again, you this path at the time you're going through it, and you're like, man, I'm not at the place I want to be. What's going on here? But in hindsight, all those experiences were so crucial to my ability to really serve the guys that ultimately I was blessed to work with. So we go on the Westpac. Everywhere we went, the SEAL platoon and the Force Recon platoon, we were always together, and we would go train with like the Singapore SEALs and the Thai SEALs and whoever. Like we're doing these joint trainings, and for me as a young guy, being on the Westpac was so fun. Like being on like we would shoot on the flight deck and exercise. And, it was like something out of a movie in my head. I was like, hey, dude, I'm getting paid to do this. How awesome is this? And just be around great people, and even like in my, a lot of my really close friends were Marines that were just infantry. They weren't part of anything I was doing. It was just other guys you met. And so, that brotherhood when you're, and the men and women that you get to come up with, it's a really special thing. So being on that Westpac was amazing. Got to do a lot of the surface warfare qualifications because we were deployed, like a deployed unit above. The CO at that time wouldn't let us actually qualify, but I wanted to know about the Navy, right? And so little did I know that meant polishing handrails and lots of cleaning and stuff. But it was a cool experience. And so we eventually get to Kuwait. We're working in Udari Range, training joint forces, and then the soft element of the Westpac was doing things south of the southern no-fly zone to like get rid of Iraqi bunkers and minefields and whatever with the EOD guys. And so it was like my first time, being out and watching things go kaboom. So it was really, really cool. Unfortunately, right towards the tail end of our time in Kuwait, I get a Red Cross message that my mom's not doing so well. I actually get flown out of the desert in my camis, taken to the airport in Kuwait. They fly me back. And thankfully, I had some time with my mom before she passed. And then after that happened, obviously my unit is deployed. So, in the talks with the PSD guys or the admin folks, for those non-military people, excuse me for the acronyms, our admin guys in California said, hey, listen, since your guys are gone, just stay home, take care of your family and do what you need to do. So, and I had no leave. I'm a new guy, right? So some senator, I don't even remember who, a friend of my uncle's got involved, and they got me like free leave, or like a hardship, something. I can't remember what it was called, but I got to stay at home for some time. And then a week before the Westpac gets back, I go back out to California, and I just was struggling with my sister, who at the time was a sophomore in college. She was doing everything, man. She was taking care of my dad, my brother, the house, the funeral. I mean, like, she had way too much on her shoulders at a young age. And I felt like I was abandoning her and my family, right? So I got a hardship, again, with that same senator, some type of hardship relocation where they said, hey, listen, this guy's family is in extremis. It'd be better for him if he was near there. And the deal, like they typically try to keep you on the coast that you start, right? So a lot of West Coast guys just travel up and down West Coast units, and East Coast same, right? But so I went from the West Coast, and the only orders or spot that they could find me, they actually double stuffed me into a billet, was at Bethesda at the Naval Medical Center, which was about an hour south of my family's home. So doable, much better than California, right? So, I spent that time obviously trying to go home a lot, spend time with my younger brother who was really hurting. I mean, his whole childhood was his mom being sick, so I just wanted to be around my family. And then professionally, man, I was depressed. I was like, man, I left the ocean and the mountains of California, and obviously it was worth it for my family. But, this job where I was doing the things I wanted to do, I was around the people I wanted to do. I was actually, because of that experience, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go to Buds now. Like, why wait and fulfill my entire time? I had passed that 18-month mark where you could leave early if you got accepted to a special program like Buds. And, I gave that all up for the time being. And here I am in Bethesda. And again, not to disparage anybody, but, I'm dedicated at the time to being in the best shape I can be, so that I'm capable of slinging some 250-pound guy with all kit over my shoulder or like, I wanted to be the best medic I could be for my guys. Right. And then I got to a place where I was like, does the Navy do PRTs around here? Is there standards in this place? It was a whole different mindset and culture. It was very political. It just was different, right? And so I was miserable at first, but again, I had a great chief at the time, and I don't know about how guys feel about putting their names out there, so I won't. But this guy was he was a leader, man, and aside from getting you to swallow the hard pill that you need to sometimes and just do your job, he was also really good at understanding how you may be struggling, from where I came from to where I am now and knowing what I wanted to do. So he was like, look, man, let's use this time. You obviously will have the time and flexibility to take care of your family, but let's professionalize you medically. Let's get you into some essentially like clinical rotations. So what do you want to do? What do you think is going to help you in your career? And so at the time with the Marines, I thought I had a pretty good understanding of physical therapy and trauma medicine, but thinking in special operations terms, I little to no experience with children, women, so I was like, I would like to go to pediatrics, preferably like NICU, PICU, something more critical in nature. I would like to be around OB. I want to understand women's health as well as I do, a young male Marine or SEAL. Like I'm probably going to work with them. I just wanted to expand my medical knowledge. And so I ended up going to the PICU at the time at the Army Hospital, Walter Reed there. They had a joint agreement to share staff essentially. And so I was working there, got a ton of experience. And then I got moved into a thing called protocol where you take care of Congress, Senate, presidential, vice presidential staff. You are now a facilitator of urgent care for people and expedient care for people that don't have time. Right. And so you learn about the logistics of scheduling and moving things and getting people in and out quickly. And then lo and behold, 9/11 happens. And so I was actually walking out of an appointment with a congressman and, all these people in the main lobby are gathered around this TV. And I was like, man, what's going on here? And, sure enough, I walked up with the congressman and his phone is going bonkers. And we had pagers. And so my pager, when I come out of the room, I turn it back on because when I'm with them, I want to silence my device. So, they're my concern. Anyway, like all I hear is phones going off and pagers going off. And I'm like, what is going on? And sure enough, we walk up and see the second plane hit the tower. And I was like, oh man. First off, I was like, can I call my old guys to see if I can, come back? And like, I knew that, much like you and most of the other guys that we've served with, like I knew the fight was on and I just wanted to be part of it. Right. And so I was part of, again, another experience that really shaped my ability to care for the guys that I ultimately was charged with, but it was on the USNS Comfort, the hospital ship. That was one of the deployable platforms for the hospital. And so they sent a bunch of us up to New York to help, but there was nothing to do. So we could do constructively. And so they kept some folks there to help with first responder care, washing eyes and faces. And then we came back because we were getting ready to go overseas. And so eventually hopped on the Comfort again and was in Iraq and flew medevacs. I was part of what's called CASRAC, which is it's essentially like the ER. It's the receiving area of the ship. So that was my first taste of really significant trauma. And then obviously being with most of the people we were receiving, aside from the injured Marines or Army folks were Iraqis. And so obviously, speaking what they speak and the experience was amazing. Lots of injured children and civilians. And so I got to use all the skills I had been cultivating now on a much more serious level, if you will, serious nature of injury. And ultimately, that experience of managing those injuries in a much more clean setting than in the dirt prepared me for the dirt. I felt like, there's nothing that's going to get thrown at me out here that I haven't already seen. I'm just going to be in a dirtier environment.
So after September 11th, are you still at Walter Reed in Bethesda until Iraq kicks off?
Yeah. So I'm still at Bethesda, and actually started working to get back to BUDS. And at the time, that's when they switched, like you'd mentioned, the job codes that you could have before. Mm-hmm. Now it was they made their own rating because, as you know, guys were SEALs that had, they were the intelligence specialists and they were taking rating exams for intelligence specialists, and they knew nothing about the job that those guys are doing, right? So guys weren't advancing. And so finally the Navy does the right thing. They make SO a rating so that SEALs are then tested on things they're actually doing to advance. And at the time, the detailer was, I want to say it was another corpsman. I believe it was a HM2, a SEAL. And he had said, hey, listen, if you really like this medical thing, then you need to stay medical. And what I would suggest is go the DMT or go the dive medical technician route, because that's who we're using at the teams. We're using DMTs, and then we have, surface IDCs and subsurface IDCs as our like sick call guys. But the actual medic that we're taking out and on training and in dirt are these DMTs and any like marine trained medics. So I was like, sweet. Well, I got the marine thing already. I'll go do this dive thing. So I was getting ready to go to that, and then I got called for Iraq when that kicked off. So that's when I was on the Comfort.
And did you travel on the Comfort all the way over, or did you fly and meet it?
No, I flew and met it. So the ship went with like a minimum manning crew, and then the most of the body flew over there, and then we got brought onto the ship.
So when you're at Walter Reed in Bethesda after Afghanistan kicks off, are you seeing some of those injuries come back? Are you treating those guys there? Now you're treating combat injuries, combat wounded at Bethesda and Walter Reed?
Yep. Sure enough, some of those guys start showing up. And I mean, most of the things weren't significant in nature trauma-wise, because it was before the dawn of, these
IEDs and
ELPs and IEDs and all that crazy stuff that we started to see. So it was, like gunshots, falls, from as well as I do, that is some spicy terrain over there in some spots. And so, we had guys that were injured from falls, blast injuries. And so, I got to see those injuries more in a clinical setting. So it wasn't like I was hands-on getting to do more than palliative care for some of those folks or helping them, along the way in their rehabilitative process. But, a lot of the guys, I had more in common with them than the other medical people that were around them. And so, we would talk, and a lot of them were alone, right? Like their buddies are still over there, and here they are sitting 1,000 miles away from where they want to be, and they're injured. And so some of those guys just wanted to talk, and so I got to obviously hear a lot, learn a lot, and just, mentally be prepared for what I knew eventually I was going to be involved in.
Yeah, man. And that experience on the Comfort, so the Comfort and it's Comfort and the Mercy, right? Are those the two?
Yes, Mercy's on the West Coast, Comfort on the East Coast.
Man, what incredible platforms those are. But
crazy.
You do that, and then is it during that time frame where are you getting some other training in there also? Like you're going to these advanced schools and that sort of thing? And then how do you make your way back into that ground combat medic role?
Yeah, so you do obviously lots of training, just like, a SEAL would go to schools to sharpen up on comms and weapons and things as needed. There's different schools you can go to, different experiences you can volunteer for, being part of OR crews. And again, just trying to absorb as much information as I could. Like you said, eventually I'm back on the Comfort. We're over there. We were pre-positioned before the war actually started. Officially, on the TV screens, but we were there to, serve as needed. And so we were right off, like the southern, where Nasiriyah is in the southern part, we're just right there in the Gulf, and so ferrying. So I was, before I'd gotten on the ship, and this is how great that chief was. By this time, this guy's a senior chief. He's going to be a master chief soon. I was an E5, so an HM1 or 6, I'm sorry, HM1. Oh, sorry, E5, HM2. TBI,
it is confusing, by the way.
Yeah. So I'm an E5, which is a pretty low ranking, but just you're starting to get into more leadership, right? As an enlisted guy. And they were, at the time, the emergency department at Bethesda was all staffed by civilians, but the Navy wanted to take it back over. And so they needed, obviously a staff for that. And one of the roles was to be the head NCO. And they were looking for a senior chief or chief for that role. And my senior chief was like, I got the guy for you, and he's an E5. And it ruffled a lot of feathers and certainly pissed off some people. But I walked into that job knowing, like, he made it clear, like, don't mess this up, like, make me proud and go do what I know you can do. So again, another experience that helped me down the road at the time. Man, my now my wife, but at the time, a girlfriend, Katie, was like, dude, what are you killing? You're killing yourself. Like, you're working all the time. We didn't have what's called a coder. A coder are the people that like actually code each patient interaction so that the appropriate money is then paid to the emergency department for whatever it is that they treated and the supplies and equipments they use. So aside from working during the day or night, like I would take night shifts so my junior people wouldn't have to if they didn't feel like they were ready for those things. So my schedule was all over the place. And then on top of that, I was doing all the coding because we didn't have a coder, and all the build out of our ambulance program. I mean, like, man, I was probably the busiest I'd ever been throughout my entire career.
Yeah.
But it was such a great experience learning all those parts and pieces. And again, something that from my, bag of skills that I pulled on constantly further down the road. And then, as you mentioned, that's obviously Iraq kicks off. So I get back on the Comfort. And because of my experience at the hospital, they wanted me to be the LPO or NCO of what they call the CASRAC, the casualty receiving, or ER of the ship. And so that's where I was. And then that eventually led to, hey, we need to do some medevac flights on and off this thing too. Any volunteers? And boop, hey, this guy, I wanted all the experience I could get. So did some of those, and then, came back home and then went to dive school.
Oh, so regular dive school. So you have to do that first before you do dive medicine. Is that how that goes?
Yep. So I came back, went to the Naval Dive and Salvage Training Center down in Panama City, Florida, which coincidentally is right where STV school is too. So I ended up working there with a lot of the guys that I ended up with STV at. So I had such a long history with some of these guys. We essentially came up in the teams together and then ultimately at Damnac. But so I go down there. You have to go through dive school first. Same thing. I'm on the same program where like I got to finish at the top. Yeah. So I get my choices of things. And so knockout dive school.
And how's dive school? Is that like, is it similar to what you heard second phase was like? I've heard that it's like a second phase and of buds, but and how cool is that?
It was awesome. You remember that, what was that movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. and De Niro, Men of Honor or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Something like that.
So I just seen that actually before. And I was like, man, that's cool. Like hard hat diving.
Dude, I love Robert De Niro's like, when it comes up those not the bad conduct, but not the good conduct. What is that? It's like all the way up his sleeve. Like it's so fantastic. Yeah. I love that part.
Totally. Yeah. He's got red stripes instead of gold.
Yep. Yeah. That's like my favorite part of that movie.
You and me both. All of us that served appreciate those guys. Like my first chief when I was with the Marines, actually, he was that guy. He was a chief and had red all the way up his arm. It was awesome. Yeah. But anyway, you go to dive school, you go through second class dive school, and then you they put you in like an X division essentially where you're waiting for enough people to show up to do your dive medical training. And so because of the gap there, I got to go through first class dive training as well. And then they do what's called master diver evals, where they bring candidates down to become master divers for their few weeks of that's like hell week for divers. Maybe master divers, they torture those guys with every kind of dive accident, injury, live on the water. And I actually have an experience. I sent you that little thing I had to do for school where I got tested. But that experience again was awesome because as the medic, I got to see like I'm an actor at this point. I'm wearing the hard hat. I'm faking the dive hit or injury and seeing what these guys and the DMTs are doing. So me, I'm like, learn. So then eventually I get into DMT school and same thing. They're like, dude, you finish first, you get to pick where you go. And so I knew that I wanted to go to back to the NSW side of things. And so, as it would be, SDV was available. And I was like, dude, send me there. And so that's where I ended up after dive school.
No way. So in dive, But is there another dive medicine part of that after dive school? Or do you?
Oh yeah. So
and how
yeah,
was it? What challenged you during that course? Because you've been so comfortable in the water, and obviously you've been doing the medical stuff, and you've been now in the military for a little while. You got some mileage on you. You've been over on the comfort. You've seen a lot at this point. So any stumbles along the way? Or did you just not sail through? But was it challenging?
Yeah, it's certainly challenging. I as far as the things that I personally was doing to myself to embrace discomfort, I never wanted to be like, for example, when we're training, the days it's cold, the rain is blowing sideways. Like, we all know it's cold. I didn't want to be the guy being like, man, it's cold. Like those guys like made me,
right.
And so I was just like, instead of working out in the gym, it's raining sideways outside. I'm going to go work out outside in the rain or snow, or, I just wanted to harden my mind, if you will. And so I think I went to dive school with an advantage mind state wise, but it still was, it's challenging, from
and you do pool comp and everything, right? Like they come down and they pound you and they
hated me during that because I could hold my breath forever.
I love pool comp. That was my favorite because it was like the one time where you're not putting your hands on the instructor, but it's not like you're just getting yelled at and like doing push-ups and sit-ups and you're just not like just taking it. You get to like, push back a little bit by showing them what you can do. And there's that physical interaction. So that, and then the life-saving when you're like, have to pull the different people over in first phase to the side of the pool or whatever. And they take you down and slam you on the bottom. Like that was like, all right, from jujitsu and everything, I was like, when to relax and then when to do my thing. So I love that. Those were like the two times that I can remember where you get to kind of go mano a mano with an instructor rather than just like get yelled at and doing push-ups. Like, yes, sir, whatever.
And I used to be a little sneaky, like in the pool, when they would do like the beehive where we're all like packed into a tight area, and you're treading, but as you get moved to the center, you ultimately get pushed underwater, and then you got to. So they're like instructors are pulling you down and they see you and getting you back up to the edge. And like, I would fight those guys like, I thought you were another student instructor. Sorry. Nice. The drown proofing, obviously getting hits in the pool with your gear on and stuff. I was calm because again, with free diving, not that you have a chance to breathe up, but I knew the reflexes. I knew the air hunger. I knew how much time I had after those things. So I never panicked in the pool. The thing that was like challenging that I hated was when they would fill up the mask with water and like make you lay down and sing
or kicks and stuff.
Or like put your head right under the surface so you're upside down over the edge and they're like, talk, and you're like,
it's like getting waterboarded. Before it was
exactly. When people talk about waterboarding, I'm like, that's not that
bad. Right. I think that's the whole part.
It's way worse.
Well, that's the whole part of that whole part of that training is to show that you're comfortable in the water. And so just being comfortable down there is, you're not going to panic, obviously, is just as important as knowing, what to do and knowing the technical aspects of what to do when, and you were obviously comfortable in the water. I haven't thought of the beehive thing for a while, nor have I thought of the mask thing for a while. Probably reasons that I blocked those out of my head.
I remember all those fun things. And, ultimately it was so cool to have a hard hat on and dive. And then you learn from like, you'll have some of the divers that are there. So when you're going through second class school, the instructors will have first class divers, already Navy fleet divers, kind of helping them with the students to start getting them into the mode of being a dive supervisor, right? And so those guys would whisper in your ear like, hey man, when the stage, which is the thing you stand on, and you stand faceplate to faceplate with the other hard hat diver, and your arms are kind of, intermeshed, and you're looking at each other so that you could recognize if on the way down or up, my buddy's having hit by his eyes or, something. So, eventually they're like, hey, listen, once you get like 20 feet down, just sit back to back and start pulling umbilical down. So you have this big pile of umbilical. So when you hit the bottom, you could just run around, you're like,
really?
Okay, cool. So you have, to me, it was so much fun, getting to walk around on the bottom of the ocean in, a hard hat and you just, I'm like, man, this is so cool. I'm getting paid to do this.
You're doing the stuff you dreamed of growing up. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was super fun. And then eventually some of us went down. I had to do, you do additional training in the hyperbaric chamber and then the mixed gases. And so we go to this place in the Keys, and there they have an old Mark V, fully operational with the canvas suit and everything, the boots. and then an old Helios Mark V as well, which is like, a couple 100 pounds of stuff. It is amazing. But I got to dive with that thing, so it was really cool.
That's awesome. And then you end up at SDV. So now finally you're at a SEAL team.
Yeah, I'm finally at a SEAL team. It's fun. My introduction to that, as you remember, is like you get. I showed up with I think 2 of the frogs that I knew from Panama City. They were in SDV school, and then a couple admin people. And they're like, we have our grinder PT sessions every morning, and so the CO brings us all out, and he's like, "Hey, we got some new guys here," and I'm the guy closest to him, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you tell everybody about yourself?" And this, and I was like, "Good morning. My name is," and they're like, "Shut up." Everyone.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember this, having fun with each other, and they're like, "Next," and then the next guy's like, and they're like, "Stop," and the whole thing. But
I remember it well.
Yeah. I was like, man, I'm in the right place. Nice. This is it.
Nice. And how long are you there before you transition east? You do a deployment? Because I know they do different things out there deployment wise, but do you get to do some real world operations while you're there, or what? How long are you there?
Yeah. So I ended up, I think I was there just shy of 4 years. Mm-hmm. I ended up getting pulled a little early, but yeah. So my first thing, obviously, they're not going to just put you in an SR or the reconnaissance. So in the SDV, there's the diver platoons, and then there's the SR or the SEAL platoons, the surveillance and reconnaissance side of it, like the guys that go out in the SDV, and then the guys that launch the SDV. And luckily for me as a diver, I knew like, man, I'm going to get to do all these jobs and learn all this stuff. So I was excited about it. But at the beginning, you're just fully support. They want you understanding your place, learning who does what and how it works. And so I ended up being support for a combat swimmer block of training. And I remember when I went through that stuff in Pendleton, and I was like, man, it's fun. And then obviously those guys get introduced to the SDV, the passengers, if you will. And I just remember seeing like everybody was always throwing up and nauseous, and I'm like, man, are these guys babies? Like, what's going on? And then they're like, hey, you want to ride in this thing? And I was like, yeah, hell yeah, sure. And oh my, it's dark. All you have is like a little light and button where you can communicate emergency, and some other codes that you can pass to the guys driving and navigating. But when they would do like their shallow water peaks in the harbor, this thing is like sloshing with the surface, and you're just in this dark box, and you're sitting 4 dudes side by side, and you're stacked up on each other. So you're like, I'm resting my arms on somebody's legs and leaning against their Drager, and same on the other side. And I just remember like, I'm going to throw up, sure enough. So it's like, move the valve, and you're like so nauseous. So again, another thing, got humbled, but awesome experience. Got to be part of the DDS side of things, or the diver side of things, and the SR side. Deployed on a sub, and again, got to see another part of the Navy in the submarine itself. That was so cool. So
yeah, no, SDVs like that. They're like kind of the one thing that's left out there that's people don't know that much about yet. There's been so much news coverage of different SEAL missions, or just military in general, over the last 20 plus years now. But SDV still has that little piece that's it's still fairly unknown and secretive, and they do some cool stuff for those listening that are interested into going that route. It's what a spot. I remember when they called out our names at the 3rd phase of BUDS, and they were like, letting you know where you're going to go. And in my head, I'm like, oh man, I do not want to go to SDV, because being in the back of that thing, like shut in, it just didn't appeal. So I'm glad that when they called my name for SEAL Team 5, I was like, whew. I mean, you do it, right? You adapt, but given my first choice, but now looking back and knowing a little bit more about what they actually do out there and some of the things that they've done, I think it's pretty cool. And it's an amazing mission if you have the aptitude for it. Man, that's awesome. And so you do that, you spend your time there, and then how do you get picked up for going east?
Yeah. So, one caveat really quick for all the SEALs out there that are at SDV and are wishing they were somewhere else. Like, I don't think there's, from all that I've seen, I got to, because medics were a short supply. While I was at SDV, I did TAD with SEAL Team 10 and 8. I got to see what those guys do as well. And as far as the ability to endure suffering, I don't think anybody can hold a candle to what those SEALs at SDV do, and divers. I mean, you're in the water for 10, 12 or more hours sometimes. And on the back of a submarine. And it's just, it is a tough line of work. So the guys that come out of there, once I got to the command, I would always see them excel because, they're like, dude, I am not going back to that SDV. Like, you got to kill me to make me leave this place, So while I was at SDV, obviously things are overseas still going on, and Naval Special Warfare Development Group, which is right down the road from Little Creek, would use augments, right, to just plus up their guys. And obviously they have multiple places that they go and man and work overseas. And so by that time, I had already done a DDS platoon. So I was part of the diver crew and, rigged out the SDV on the sub and got to dive off the sub and all that stuff. It was awesome. And then I got to be part of the SR platoon. And those were the guys that we then got pulled over to Dam Neck to augment. And so, at the time, and knowing my place, obviously I'm a support guy, I'm a medic, I'm an augment, right? Or a direct support guy. And but even in my head, I was like, man, this thing, like when we want to go to the range, you got to, plan it weeks ahead, and it might not even get approved.
At SDV, you mean?
You got to ask to get your rifle, to go to this and that. And it was just like, I thought this was a SEAL team, like where we could train, and be ready for the balloon to go up. Right. And at Dam Neck, you get there and like these guys have ultimately, these cages the size of small garages where they have all their toys, right? And I was just like, and even the SEALs, they're like, this is the SEAL team I joined for. It's like, you mean I could just keep my gun and I can go to the range when I want? And so obviously in your own armory, but it's just it was easier to train there, right? And so man, I was so blessed from the time I augmented. I essentially never left. They were like, they needed medical people as well, both in the support capability and in the dirt. So, I was a hot commodity and more than willing to oblige when, okay, these guys are done. Do you want to stay for the next crew? And I was like, I'm not going anywhere. So ended up doing a lot of time in Afghanistan.
So you're just augmenting still at this point. Your stuff's still in like Hawaii in your apartment or something.
Oh no, I was at SDV too. So I was in Little Creek.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay. Yeah. Because they switched at some point in my mind. I'm thinking everything switched out to Hawaii, which it did at some point in there.
Yeah, it did later. But although now back. They have an element back here on the East Coast. But so yeah, Katie, the dogs, and they're
perfect. You're already there. You're co-located, so that's awesome.
Yeah, by this time she had moved down, and but then I was gone.
Yeah,
see ya. I'll be back in 18 months. But so I do some back-to-back deployments with the guys over there, and then when I got back at SDV, a couple of us that had stayed on, like myself and the two SEAL snipers, stayed on longer than the rest of the platoon, and so they had an award ceremony for the three of us from the stuff from Dam Neck, and I made the mistake of having my family there, and here, like, I don't talk to anybody about what I do and where I go, and other than with the guys I do those things with, and like my family thought I worked in a hospital, and here they are, like when the CO is reading this award thing about this fierce battle in the mountains and this and that, and after I get the thing, I do my kick turn and I like looking out at the audience with my two buddies, and my buddy beside me, he sees my wife, his wife, and then like all of our families crying, and he was like, "Oh shit, wow. Shouldn't have done that," And then so sure enough, they were like, "I thought you worked in a hospital," But because of I'd done my job, and they were like, "Man, this guy's on point for medical. Like, hey man, we want you to come back over here." So I was able to leave SDV a touch early, and then head over and screen and got picked up, thankfully, and then spent almost 15 years, right about walking amongst giants, man.
Well, you're one of those giants, brother. And I mean, there are guys that are walking
I
around
was
today
lucky.
that are taking their kids to soccer and baseball because you did what you did.
Yeah, man, that was my job.
Yeah, well, I mean,
It's kind of funny too. A little segue. I know I'd share this with you, but while I was at STV, I was still trying to go back to Buds, and I was like, "Fine, I'll drop Corman." Because by that time I was like, "Man, I'm doing this job. I know I can do the job,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty sure as long as I don't fall apart or break something,
Mhm.
I can probably make it through Buds." Nothing's a sure thing, but I thought odds are on my side. I'll do it. And at the time, I was an E5, and they were like, "Okay, listen, now because we have so many guys coming in, we really don't want anything above an E4 because obviously the risk there is like they would get an E5 or an E6 who then shows up at a SEAL team one day and is the LPO with zero SEAL platoon experience, right? Which understanding. So I was like, the guy's like, you cannot make rank, and I'm like, dude, I'll fail the test, like I'll stay in E5, and so like my package is going through. And then I get selected for Sailor of the Year, and then have to go out to San Diego to compete for NSW Sailor of the Year. And
dude,
because
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
They make me an E6, and I'm like,
so you got it? You got Sailor of the Year?
For the East Coast.
That's awesome. Yeah. And this you get
So,
promoted right away? Is that how that works? Like you win it, they promote you? Nice.
Yeah, but it was a killer because I was in the room and my chief, he's like, "Hey, look, man, I know you really want to do the things you want to do, but like we had to nominate somebody and I can't think of anybody else that deserves this opportunity. So like, please represent yourself well, answer the questions as best you can." And so they ask you a lot of geopolitical questions, like, what do you think about what's going on over here and this and that? And, they just want to make sure that you are understanding of what's going on around the world. And, then ask you some medical stuff and diving stuff and tactical stuff, whatever. And at the very end, I was like, "Hey, with all due respect, can you give it to that other guy? Because like, if you guys promote me, I can't go to Buds." And they're like, "Don't worry, bro, you're good." And then, sure enough, they promoted me. So like you said, the path I was meant to walk, but that's when I knew I was like, okay, well, looks like I'm not going to get to go do that. But these guys want me to come work with them. So, I mean, what a blessing and an honor. So I'll do it.
Well, I mean, truth be told, 100%, you saw more combat and did more walking this path than taking that time to go to Buds, wait for your class, go through Buds, maybe get hurt, roll back, keep going, then go to your first SEAL team, then be a new guy, and then maybe get deployed to, Colombia or the Philippines or something like that. And then work your way up and okay, finally now I'm in Iraq or Afghanistan for one deployment. Instead, you go right into the fire and keep deploying with those guys, getting after it. And just crushing it for all those years. So at this point, you're on essentially 3 months, you're going down range, and then you're coming home and you're training, and then you're doing it again. And then you're 4 months or whatever it worked out to at that time, coming back and just boom, 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 just going and getting after it. And that's what most of your time was like there. Is that right?
Yes, sir. As you know, like most of my buddies that were still at STB, you keep touch with your brothers. They were doing deployments where, they're over there for 9 months and stuff, doing like VSO and, village stabilization operations. Sorry with my acronyms. And so they're doing, I think kind of non-traditional SEAL missions, but it was just where they got plugged into. And those guys were like, "Man, I'm over here for way too long," and, whatever. And at the command, like you mentioned, we were on a much shorter cycle and obviously being careful what I say, but I think this is all publicly known. We were on 4-month deployments, and so we would have the traditional 4 months over there. But when you came home, again, since at the time, like when I first got to the command, each of the squadrons had 1, maybe 2 medics. And obviously internal to the squadron, there's lots of little pieces there that are always traveling. So even though I was assigned to 2 troop, if the other guys were traveling, when my guys were home, chilling with their fam and working at stuff, obviously at work and training at work, I was still on the road with other guys because they still needed support. So, I was always gone. I had usually about a week, maybe 2, if I was lucky, after deployments where I could hang with Katie and then ultimately when there was kids, be with kids. But for a long time, I think it was about 9 years, like I would always, like, I'm getting in trouble, like I'm choosing to travel all over the world. But my chief would be like, "Yo, dude, we got to slow down the travel here because, you're one of the most traveled people at this place yet again. And the Navy doesn't like that. So, but they're not going to say no. They need the bodies. And I knew that, like you said, I just wanted to go work, whether that was, training, or even like, as much as I hated it, being a support guy at training events, like if I wasn't allowed to participate, but had to be there to provide medical support. All of those experiences ultimately are great in shaping your ability to care for people and turn put the right hat on for the right job, so to speak. I knew that, like, if I was going to go, sit at a range, even if I was doing something else and they're like, hey man, we need a medic to just go sit at the range for now. Okay, man, I'll do it. Because I knew, just like I wanted to train, my guys wanted to train, they needed to train. So my job was to facilitate their ability to train by being healthy and then being medical support wherever they needed it. And so, even though I didn't like a lot of the jobs, sometimes, like, you still got to do them. And if you're going to do it the best you can. And, there was so much that I got to do there. Like you said, it was just, I truly feel I got to walk amongst giants, man.
And you're getting so much experience at this. I mean, you had a lot of experience before, but now it seems like that pedal goes to the ground and you're just getting so much experience here. Do you remember, what was your first firefighter? What was that like? After having done so much in this lead up as far as training goes, but now you're in the thick of it. And what was that experience like?
Funny. Like, there's so much when we watch the videos from camera footage over there, there's always like this laughing and, obviously when moments allow, but, like you have this levity to get you through what I would describe as an otherworldly experience. Like, the fact that we're at a place where I am actively engaged in trying to end another human's life and they're trying to do the same with me. I'm like, we failed. And now we just got to do what we got to do here. Right. And that is, I got to survive. My buddies got to survive. So after that first time, it was actually kind of funny. We were in the mountains in Afghanistan, and I was with one other SEAL from my unit. And then we were with two guys that used to work with us, but that were now working with someone else. And we had a group of Afghanis with us that were trained and those guys were warriors. Man. It was really great to have that experience. But it was funny. We had creeped over. We were taking mountains to establish those BCPs, the border checkpoints, those big forts that you probably remember over there. And so we had an area right on the border east of Koust, where there was all the rat lines of explosives and ammo that was coming in from Pakistan, and young Marines and Army guys are getting injured, and school kids are getting blown up. It's just crazy, the stuff that you see being done to other humans over there. And so, our job was, one, go shut off those rat lines, and two, take over a bunch of these mountains, because we're going to build some new BCPs out here for the Afghanis to man. And we had crested over this ridge at, it's obviously pitch black, it's nighttime, and we're looking for this POO site, or this, point of origin where these mortars are coming from at us. And so we had landed on a mountaintop a few days earlier. So obviously they know someone's there because they saw some helicopters touch down and take off. Right. But they don't know where we are. So a lot of it's like recce by fire. Right. And so me and a couple of these guys, it was me, the SEAL I work with, and one of the guys that used to work with us that was now working with some other folks. We traversed to this other mountaintop, and we're sitting. I like creep over the edge, and I have an ISLID because we have air over top to try to find this thing to eliminate it, right? And we see a mortar go off, and so I rope it, or I circle
laser,
it with
for everybody
laser.
Listening.
Yeah, so we have this thing that's essentially like a lightsaber that shoots out this beam of light that can, the airplane can see. And so my buddy, he's talking to the airplane. He's trained qualified JTAC, and he's like, "Hey, Elias, rope that thing again." So I rope the plane or circle the plane. So he's like, "Okay, I see you guys," and then I rope the thing, and then this rocket, it was like those BM1s, those big metal tubes that they would stuff with these old rockets. This rocket comes flying at us, and I hit the deck, and I hit the ground, and I look up, and both of them are standing like, "What are you doing down there?" as this thing sails over us. And it was like, 20 feet probably over our heads, but close enough for me.
Yeah, it's close enough.
Yeah, like in nods, I'm like, that's coming right at us, and so I hit the dirt, and then the guy, again, I don't want to say his name, but he's like, "You okay, buddy?" And I was like, "Oh, dude," like my first thing, and like I'm diving in the dirt. So that was the first time like getting something shot towards me where I didn't maintain my street cred. But other times, it's like I never really. We train so much, and obviously there's nobody better than you guys at overwhelming violence, right? Like you wash through a place like water, and it's on our terms most of the time. So and being the medic, it's not like I'm the point guy kicking through the gate or going over the wall, but obviously being involved in some of that stuff, it never really occurred to me at the time like, oh my God, I'm getting shot at, or this is freaky or whatever. It was just like, move, communicate, and understand, like in my head, based on the map or the GRG that I looked at, like where I was in that picture, where everyone else was, because ultimately I may get called to a certain side or something. And I wanted to know, like just maintain that level of understanding, if you will. And so a lot of those times I never really had a chance after, like when everyone else was looking for things after the party was over, like intel or whatever it might be. That's typically when I got called, like, now it's your turn to do work, unless someone, unfortunately was injured during the actions. So most of the time I was, treating any of our guys or our dogs if they had injuries. And then ultimately any Afghani, woman, kid, even the man, the bad guy, so to speak. We took care of everybody. So that's typically, like, I was so involved in that most of the time, especially if it was a case that required my care all the way on the helicopter back to the fob and in the fob to hand off. So a lot of times I was just like mentally exhausted by the time we got back. And by the time I would get back from the cache or the medical tent, I'd come in, and by then the boys would already be around the fire pit, with cigars and guitars and unwinding. And I was just like, I just want to melt into a bed right now, because it's going to be light soon and the rest of the base is going to be up making noise. Like I need to try to get a couple of Z's. So it's just like a whirlwind, honestly.
And how about like your first time when you have to, do fire maneuver, or you're part of an element that's a maneuvering element? What is that like your first time? Have you trained so much that you're just like on autopilot, or is it, hey, I'm as a medic here, I'm thinking about these, these other things like, hey, where we're going to go if somebody gets hit, where we're going to take them, where I'm going to do the work, where I'm going to put that helo down, or have somebody put the helo down for me to get them out of here. You're thinking about all these other things, but what was that like the first time that you're maybe a compound assault, or maybe you're ambushing, or you're getting ambushed, or you have to maneuver elements, and you're part of that maneuver elements, and you're a gun in the fight. You're not just maybe you're not just thinking about the medical stuff. Maybe you're in that fight. What was that like for you?
Awesome. I mean, again, like I feel that anyone that ends up in that world, special operations as a whole, but obviously, at an SMU, the guys that I was lucky enough to support, we trained all the time. So and you develop an understanding of what people are going to do, how they talk, how they move, and on and on. And you just, it's like a dance, right? And seeing it done well and executed to near perfection most of the time is, again, like I said, I got to walk amongst giants. I felt lucky enough to even be there and see some of the things that I saw people do on the battlefield, superhuman things. And most of the time those things go unrecognized. And so, again, I was just like a student the entire time, getting in those situations where you're in a gunfight or getting ambushed, or the times where we would, do those things that like set up, false exfils and try to get the targets that you're after. It's surreal for sure. I so many times, like if you ever try to go back and recollect, we didn't really, the wins are great. Like, hey, mission success and jackpot touchdown, whatever it was that you were after, you got, and here are the spoils of intelligence and things that we can learn to be even better at this. but it was really what I saw when we would lose, a guy, unfortunately, or any of the things where there were some failures or hiccups, if you will, some missteps, where the way that was analyzed and picked apart and learned from in such not without emotion. Obviously, if someone was injured or hurt, like those things, the guys, it kills us all. And obviously, that doesn't even compare to what that guy or his family ultimately goes through. But aside from it's like, what can we learn from this? How can we be better? And so there's so much that you get to learn and see there. So again, I loved it all, man. There's so many times where now operating in the business world, I will joke to my wife or my co-founder, he's a retired team guy. I'd be like, I miss war, dude. War was so much easier than this. Like, I know what my job is. We're all on the same piece of paper. We all have the support we need to go get whatever it is we're needing to do done. And obviously things are a little different. Business people may have their own motives, but it was a special experience, man. I as hard as it was sometimes, especially like, the times I had to knock on some doors and do that whole thing, man, other than that, it was a dream job.
Yeah. And you're thinking tactically on the ground because you're part of these maneuver elements operating at the highest levels of special operations. And then you're learning along with those guys about how to do it better the next time, how to refine it a tiny bit more to get better and better with each operation. But then you're also thinking on the medical side of the house. Like as an operator, I'm thinking, okay, I got a couple tourniquets. Okay, you throw one of those things on, I call you. But you're thinking a lot more in depth about that than I certainly ever was. I mean, we know the med plan, we know all those things, contingencies. We talk about all those contingencies at each phase of the operation, the medical contingencies, all of those things. We're getting better. We're learning from combat medicine, learning lessons because now we're in sustained combat operations, and we're incorporating that into our plans. And you, though, are thinking about both. You're thinking about the tactics, and then you're thinking about how to get better at your focus on the medicine side of the house, on the combat medicine side of the house. That's a lot to think about, especially when you're working on a friend, a teammate, whose family that you know. What was it like to work on somebody like the first time that something traumatic happened on the battlefield?
Yeah. First, I'll say, like, when we think about all the planning and stuff, I was obviously fortunate enough to be around guys that I considered experts at whatever it was that they were tasked with doing. Right. And so I would marry myself to the recce guys or the snipers, the advanced party guys to understand the routes we were going to go. And then along the way, analyze, train, and think like, okay, based on historics, we know that we might get ambushed here or here. Or so where are my HLZs or my helicopter landing areas going to be for medevacs? And then so you learn to plan properly before you even go do something. And as we're going along and they're calling certain route points, like, okay, we're here. I knew that, okay, now I'm moving on to the next set of HLZs, the next set of HLZs. And so my job was to be the medic there. And like you said, I'm a gun when needed, but obviously my duty is to take care of those guys, to do my utmost to make sure that, everybody comes home. And so, being around people that execute on such a high level makes you execute at a high level, because if you don't, the thing I loved about that place and any SEAL team or even that recon unit I was at is like meritocracy. If you deserve to be here, you will be here. If you don't need to be here, that's okay. You're going to go somewhere else though, As far as working on people, I always looked at it like I trained myself. And again, going back to the experience on the Comfort when I was in the CASRAC, when I started seeing children come in, early in the war, when the Iraqis were retreating, they would shoot women and kids and men, civilians, because they knew that once the Americans got there, they would stop to care for those folks and then thus enable a retreat hastily for those Iraqis. So a lot of the people we saw were Iraqi civilians shot by Iraqi forces. And you would see these kids with horrific injuries. And it killed me, dude. I didn't even have kids at the time. I just, I'm seeing this young, innocent, fragile being that, was, treated violently by another human. And so in that time, I was like, okay, I need to steel my mind and focus on the work that I need to do and not the emotional component. So I almost became like a car mechanic, right? Where, like you said, little hole, little patch, big hole. It's just looked at it like, okay, what I need to do to keep this engine running, it needs air, it needs its fluids. It, it's like, it was just very systematic, my approach. And from your training with some of the combat medicine we do with the team, you're just going through protocols, and it's like a series. I think like trauma medicine is a series of adjustments. It's like flying a plane. All you're doing is making corrections the whole time, right? So it's like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then when I'm done all these things, I'm going to come back to the top. I'm going to recheck all my work, make sure nothing else is going down. However, when it's someone you love, like we say long live the brotherhood, and, like the men and women I got to work with, and I'm sure you feel the same. It's almost like a bond beyond your family, especially when it's forged in gunfire, right? And war, that experience is just, again, otherworldly. And so you form these really deep bonds with those people that go beyond anything else I've ever felt. And knowing their girlfriends or wives and kids, and that stuff certainly will swirl around in the back of your head. And, what I find more difficult is, if the guy is unconscious or talking, especially if he's talking, I'm really good at making sure that situation stays calm. It's better for him, and it's better for me. And everyone around. But then, once like the boys start getting around and they're losing their mind because that's their brother right there. You end up having task saturation, right? Because now I'm managing my patient, I'm managing a crowd, I'm managing comms to the helicopters, I'm managing assets. And so it is a lot of work to do when it's called upon. And so I just always said, like, hey man, if I approach this like a mechanic and I remove any feeling whatsoever about who I'm working on and what's happening here, I will be better to that guy than if I'm like, yo, bro, hang in there. Like the stuff you see in movies, like that's not going to help anybody. So, it was tough for sure. And more so afterwards, right? Like after I've handed that guy off to the medevac, or if I've gone all the way back with them to the FOB and in the medical tent, or, the facility, wherever we go to, once they're like someone else's charge, and you have that moment to like collect your gear and slump against the wall, those are the times where, like, I am not ashamed to say, like, I would be overcome with emotion, like crying my ass off, because I'm like, man, did I do everything that I could have for that guy? Did I do the right thing for him? And then I would be analyzing everything I did. Did I do that right? Should I have done this? It's like, I just go back again, like the guys that I was around, how they would analyze their performance on ops. I needed to do the same. So for me, it was just, like try to be very analytical about it, try to remove emotion from it. But it certainly is crazy, crazy challenging.
So you get back and you're running through those after actions in your head. How could I have done it better? Are you sharing those lessons learned on the medical side of the house with other medics? Was there a way to share that? And then I guess, how did you deal with the on the emotional side of the house when you came up with something like, man, I could have done that differently, or if you made a mistake or something, or hey, we could have done this a little faster, or I missed this, or whatever it is. How did you look at those as ways to get better going forward, obviously, but then how did you deal with that emotionally, or is it just part of the job and that's just what it is?
Yeah, no, it certainly is part of the territory. There's so many things that come up. I mean, even today, and I'm sure you feel the same. There's days where I'm in like so much physical pain or dealing with some old injury, where you just think like, man, that's part of the cost of doing that work. Like, we all work in this world and we stack up a lot of bills, and one day they come due, and emotional ones they're part of that. And so, at the time, um, I never wanted to say like, hey, I'm having a tough time here. Not that I ever did, but like, I need some time to, deal with this, or because I was worried like, okay, that's cool. You take a knee, but you're off the ride and I watch, the train disappear into the distance. So the deal back then. Guys didn't want to say if they're injured. Like I treated my own battlefield injuries quietly because I was afraid that I would, get sent home. And so, and to make clear, like I never did anything where I would be, first and foremost, I never ever wanted to be a liability. So it's not like I was treating significant things on myself, but like, pulling frag out of my legs or some of that stuff. You do whatever you can to stay there because those are your guys. You're willing to do everything and anything to stay there. Again, you've done that stuff. So that's your family, and so being able to tear apart your lessons learned. Thankfully, I never had anything egregious where I was like, man, I totally failed that guy. But there are times where, like, say you put a trach tube in a guy, but then you got to move because people are still trying to eliminate you as well, and you're moving hastily with a guy that's significantly injured, and things can get ripped out, and you got to then stop behind true cover, not just concealment, but actual hard cover that can protect you, and redo everything before you move again. I mean, it's just like on and on and on. So in those moments, you think like, man, was there a different way I could have secured that thing so those branches didn't rip it out or this or that or whatever, And so, I thankfully, I never had anything really where I was like, man, I totally screwed the pooch. But other medics have, and we're all human. That's fair. And to your point, what we all did was shared those lessons learned. So I would have a few PJs assigned to me, to help augment, as well as another, corpsman or two. And so we would all talk internally. We would do like study sessions, once a week. We would get together and we would, if we didn't have any battlefield things that we wanted to talk about, we would say like, hey, today let's refresh our memory on analgesics, or how to anesthetize somebody to do X, Y, or Z, or how to intubate them, or whatever. We just were always trying to sharpen our skills. And then collectively in the organization of soft medicine, you report back to the command, obviously, and whoever it is you're reporting to downrange to share any after actions. And then those get disseminated throughout, SOCOM. So, and then obviously we have the Special Operations Medical Conference, and guys share lessons learned there, or new therapies or treatments or protocols or whatever. So there is a lot of, just like on the SEAL side of things, there's a lot of, hey, we need to make sure everybody is aware of this. Or sometimes we would have equipment failures, like we would get some new device that failed, or a needle would break, or this, chest tube would fail because this plastic didn't work in super cold areas, or whatever it might be. So you just try to share any lessons learned with equipment and stuff that you have that isn't working right, to then replace it, but then also make sure everybody else has the same information.
Yeah. And then when you lost somebody overseas, how did you deal with it then? And then how do you deal with it today? And do you think that you dealt with it in the most healthy way possible then and today? Or how did you deal with that? And I asked that for other people that are out there that might not necessarily be dealing with some of the trauma of the battlefield in the most healthy way. Maybe they, they're an E5, did one deployment, were part of something horrific, and now they're trying to move on with their lives. Or maybe they're not even in the military and they dealt with a car crash or a death of a loved one or something like that. So, what was that like at the time? And then what is that like dealing with it today?
Man, great question. It's tough, right? The first time somebody, I wasn't even there, but a buddy, a really, really, really close friend, like my twin brother, he was overseas, got injured, and I was back at command, and they're like, hey, we need you to go, knock on the door. And because he wasn't deceased, he was just injured, I could go in civvies and hopefully not scare the hell out of this woman that was 9 months or 8 months pregnant at the time, like she was ready to deliver. And so, I go with another one of his buddies. We knock on the door. As soon as she opened the door, like face went white. She started falling backward, and I get through the glass porch door as quickly as possible, and like, hey, you're okay. He's fine. And you go through that thing. And so that was the first taste of like, we're not unbreakable, And even though I wasn't there, I was just like, I couldn't wait for my friend to get home and hug him and help him and whatever. Being overseas, losing guys, oh, dude, I don't think, and again, what the families go through is millions of times worse than I think anything I've ever experienced. But it is gut wrenching. You obviously you're hurting, and then you're with your group of guys that are hurting. And some more than others. There's guys where it's like, man, that was my swim buddy and buds, and like our families grew up together, and it's like you have part of your heart ripped out. It's someone that you truly love and care about. Obviously we'd lost a few guys through the years, like onesies and twosies. The first one that really floored me was when we lost Adam, Adam Brown, who I know you knew, amazing guy. As a support guy, we don't always get treated the best, but he was one of those guys where, he treated me like an equal and shared his knowledge. And, if I ever wanted to train he was always like, yo, I got you, bro, let's go. Just an amazing guy. And to know like how devoted he was to his spirituality and his family, his kids, just absolutely heartbreaking to go through those. And again, it's got to pale in comparison to what the families go through. And then obviously for me, something I still struggle with today was extortion. That was my family, my troop, right? And I spent more time with those guys over the course of 5 years than I did my own wife and kids. And right before that deployment, I got selected to go to another squadron at the command. And I still remember hugging them and see you guys soon and the whole deal. And I think it was a Friday night. I was shaping surfboards on the side just for fun, something I love to do. And I was at my shaping bay at a buddy's house, and the phone rings, and it's my buddy who I know, who's on the ops rotation, who stays back and it helps logistics. So he had just had a kid, so they decided to keep him back. And I see him calling me on a Friday night at I think it was like 9:00 or something, and I was like, hey brother, who is it? And he's like, I can't tell you over the phone. I need you to come in. I was like, and I just had a beer, and I was like, dude, I just had a beer, and maybe another one's going to be, following after this news. Is like, I need you to come in. I need your help. And I was like, okay, who is it? And he was like, it's all of them. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, it's all of them. I need you to come in. And then he hung up. So I was just like, what the hell is he talking? And sure enough, I drive into work, and it was all of them, and that's, again, I can't imagine what those families struggle with. I nothing but admiration for, you want to talk about some warriors, those women and the way that they pulled their kids together and each other and got through that. Oh my God, amazing. More brave than anything I've seen on the battlefield. And it taught me so much about strength and moving forward in life, if you will. But man, that's tough when, like for me, I lost my whole social circle. Everybody I spent time with was gone. So yeah, I don't think you ever truly get over something like that. And I know, lots of guys struggle, right? There's so many amazing things out there to help. However, access is not as easy as it should be. And then obviously we know that with the VA and the military healthcare system, one, it's overwhelmed and broken, especially on the VA side of things, as far as efficacy and taking care of people in a timely manner. And then on the military side, they're focused with active duty men and women and their families, understandably, right? So a lot of guys get left in this lurch where they begin to feel hopeless because they're not getting the therapy they want. And I think one of the ills of SOF is that we are taught to mentally bear so much. So, most people, if they twist their ankle or, hurt their arm, they're like, ouch, this hurts, I'm going to the doctor. Typically, we don't do that. We're like, whatever. And we end up stacking so many injuries, both mental and physical, that eventually we get to the place where your mind breaks, not your body, your mind is reached its limit. And for those of us that come from this world, can be a really deep hole, right? And we know guys that unfortunately have taken their lives, and I still, I get, the one thing I'll say to everybody that's out there that is going through a tough time is, like, you are not alone. Most of the guys, like, I've developed relationships over the past 20 plus years as being their sole healthcare provider, right? And so if they are feeling retired, and even still active duty guys, we'll call, like, yo, Kfoury, I need to talk, man. I'm getting ready to, I don't think I have any choice left. Like, I'm hurting my family more by staying here than if I just kill myself or whatever. And one, that's absolutely not true. The world is a better place with you in it. Your family needs you. But obviously you got to get to a place where you can feel good and you can love yourself, and reconcile with the things that you struggle with. So it's all a work. And just like it was to get through the training and end up at the job that we had, or, if you're out there struggling that you had, like, you have to apply that same tenacity to your wellness and your mental well-being. You have to put in the work every day. And there are going to be days where it's tough and it's hard. And I've been to that darkness. I know how scary and alone you feel. Even, like, I'm blessed, man. My wife and kids are amazing. I do really well I'm not a screamer. I've never laid a hand. I hate drinking, but I'm a quiet sufferer, right? And you've known me for a number of years. Like, I feel like I take on other people's pain when they come to me. And so I'll lay awake at night wondering, like, okay, I need to introduce them to this person and that person, and, like, just do everything I can to help them, because I know how bad those things hurt, the physical and emotional wounds. So, long, short, it's a work in progress for all of us, I think. And some guys are great at like, consuming that experience for what it was, and moving on, and it doesn't, bother them, if you will. I'd say what troubles me these days is not so much the experiences I went through, but it's those calls, and it's staying up worrying about people. And so anyway, long, short, it takes daily, I think, an application or an intent every day to do the things that you need to do to get the care you need to, even if it feels like it's going to take forever. You just got to keep pushing forward. But those bills will come due one day. And, I think as a community, we've done a lot better at being more open with each other and reaching out to each other. Whereas in the early days of our time, you didn't say anything. Like, if you didn't say if your leg was broken or if your feelings were hurt, you didn't talk about any of that stuff. You just suck it up, and you every old frogman adage out there, like, suck it up, buttercup, or embrace the suck, or whatever it might be, like, only easy day was yesterday, like, get back out there. And you're just like, okay, that's what it is. But I think now the community is much wiser to ensure that in the after actions or post deployments, like, guys have an opportunity to speak and communicate with each other, to share difficulties, because no one else knows what we're going through but us, right? So,
Man, I know you take a lot on yourself of, at all the people you try to help. A little bit of that, ends up being a part of you moving forward, and you help a ton of people. I mean, I'll never know. No one will ever know exactly how many people you've saved, not just on the battlefield, but after, in this post-military chapter in life, and then while you were still in, and all those years where you were helping guys on the side deal with all things physically and psychologically. Like, it doesn't make you reevaluate your life choices and get out. Like, you double down and you stay there for a lot longer. And you could have taken an off ramp at any time along there to either go to, like, a shore duty, go to a training command, go do something, take a break. And you don't do that. You keep doing the job. And do you think that staying focused, like, helped you work through extortion 1-7 and all the other things that you'd seen up to that point? Or was it a postponement of, like, hey, I'm gonna deal with this later. Now's not the time. I still got to work. There's still work to do out there, which I think most guys probably do.
Yeah, seeing the commitment to not only the families but what was happening downrange. Speaking about extortion specifically, obviously myself and every other guy that used to be with Gold that was back at the command was like, yo, send me. Cause they were, the deployment's not over. They were going to reconstitute a troop over there and get other guys. And so ultimately they ended up pulling from the other squadrons. Guys volunteered to go over there and not only do the job, but clean up and pack up guys' stuff and, do everything they could to bring everybody home. And so, if that's not a testament to how strong our bonds are between each other, I don't know what is. And I would say both unfortunately and fortunately enough for me, the experience that followed shortly thereafter was I got assigned as a Keiko to one of the families. And so at the time, I was assigned to another family, and I won't say them, but it was really, really close with him. And I couldn't even bring myself to look at his wife or kids in the eyes. So it's like, I can't do that. Like, give me a new guy that I don't really know. And, I will do what I can, but, being assigned to that family and, we're talking about a young woman with two, babies. Oh man. I don't think a movie could ever do it justice. And we've all seen those, scenes in the movies, but like, I will never forget the sounds from that day, the crying, the wailing, like the whole family melting. And, me and two other dudes are standing there in our dress blues. And then it's like, you got to get right to business because, hey, we got to do paperwork. We got to do all this stuff because I want to get this money to you. I want to get his affairs settled. Like, it was just a surreal experience. And all the while that is happening, I'm hurting because everybody I know is gone, And so there was a part of me selfishly that was like, I can't be here right now. Like I'm going to fall apart because this is just insane what has just happened. However, this woman needs me. And so I poured my focus into protecting her vociferously. Like if anybody, if I perceived a threat to her, like whether it was news cameras, family members, whatever, like she was my charge, and those kids were my responsibility. I owed that to that, even though I only knew him for a short time, like I owed it to him and I owed it to his family. So it allowed me, like literally during that entire time, aside from after going home that first night that my buddy told me and like melting, I didn't cry. I was just like in shock. This cannot be real. But after, going and we do the notification and, I'm there the whole day. The other two guys, they leave. So I'm alone with this family. And I stepped outside for a minute to make a call just to let people know that, things are going on track. And of course, by this time there's neighbors everywhere and there's news cameras that want to come. And, so I'm a bouncer in the cul-de-sac, like, I'll save my language for the audience, but like I see this news truck and I was like, you guys better get the, like beat it. You're not welcome. And I went and sat in the car and I was just like, I just cried, man, for like 5 minutes. I was like, okay, I'm going to give myself time to like have my own little pity party and feel bad for myself and try to like, just off gas some of this emotion that's held inside of me. And then I got to get my game together and go, provide support and whatever this young woman needs. And so that was really the only time where I was like, man, my friends are gone. And then obviously I'm like crying for this, just seeing the anguish that she just went through and her parents, like, oh my God, it was gutting. But in that experience, again, I learned so much, just like I said about the wives and seeing the strength that these women had. And again, I won't put any names out there, but there are definitely some of those women that rose to the occasion and really kept everybody moving forward in the right direction in honor of their men. It's like Spartan warrior stuff. It was just, and I learned so much about their perspective as like we joke at the Command Pink Squadron, the wives and all that, but I learned about some of the things that they struggled with. I'd never ever really sat down with Katie and said, hey, is my job affecting you? I never did that. Shame on me, because how could it not? Especially when I was doing some of the things where I didn't have as much contact with her. I can only imagine what it must be like sitting at home, especially with kids. And like our wives are everything. They are the wife or the mom, the dad, the mechanic, the veterinarian, the pediatrician. They pay the bills. I mean, they run everything so we can go do what we want to do. And just hearing the perspective of a lot of the wives, how they feel they get treated, and then obviously in an experience like this, how they feel like they get excluded, and they feel that they get looked at a different way now, not as part of the family still, but like, oh, it's like you want to say naturally, like, I am so every time I see some of those women, I'm like, I just want to hug them and say, I'm so sorry that he's gone or whatever. But you obviously they're moving on. They're trying to make sure they're strong for their kids. And so, I would say to any of the guys out there listening, if there's some wives of your teammates that are no longer with us, like treat them like they're still part of the family and not this injured, little duckling. Like they're strong, amazing women and they still need us, so.
Amazing. And then when did you decide to get off this speeding train? And what I mean, you don't hop right off. I mean, you stay in it. And what makes you, is there a certain point where you're like, you can point to, this was the signal to get out, or my family needed me, or, hey, my body's breaking down here. I've been doing this for quite some time. I might need to stretch and eat right and get healthier. Like, what was that thing that made you decide it was time to turn the page and move on?
Yeah, mine was physically, eventually I got to the point where, like I said earlier, I never wanted to be a liability to my guys. I'm there to protect and care for them, not the other way around. And I had a significant spinal injury for many years before that I ended up rehabbing from as quickly as I possibly could, and then ended up deploying a bunch more, injured my spine again. And then that second one was the one that was like, God was like, yo, dude, you didn't get the message the first time. Like,
listen up.
Time out. Like, yeah, it's time to stop, dude. So, I was eventually, my doc, who's someone I'd come up with, he was a junior doc when I was at SDV, and then ultimately became the command surgeon. And, we were just super, super close. And I, he was like, hey, look, man, you will stay on this ride until you kill yourself. Like, you can't do this anymore. We gotta fix your body. We gotta get you the care you need. And had another guy who was a medically retired ranger at the command, who was our SOCOM Care Coalition rep at the command. And between him and the doc, they saved my life, man. Honestly, like they just forced me to swallow the hard pill. Like, you are no longer fit to do this work. That's okay. Now it's time to do the things you need to do to be able to be around for the long game with your wife and kids. And so, that was a tough pill to swallow. I had literally just come back from a deployment overseas in undeclared theater of operations. And, I was like, man, now I'm doing this really cool stuff. And, I don't want to stop. But like we all have our goals, right? I wanted to make Master Chief, and I was so close, but it wasn't in the cards. So here we are. I got off the flaming roller coaster, not by choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And, but you stayed connected. Maybe people don't know this about you. You didn't just turn the page. You stayed connected to the guys, not just at your command, but at other commands, and helped them, particularly not just with the physical stuff, like, hey doc, what do I do? I did this. I still want to deploy. Can you sew me up or whatever it is. Like the mental side of the house. You've helped so many guys in this post-military chapter in life, when you could have just focused on what you're going to do next. And what is that? I want to talk to you about that too, about that transition. Cause I'm always like, what is he doing? Wait, what? What is this now? I didn't hear about this. What is this thing you're doing? Which I love following your journey. There's so many great things ahead for you on the horizon. But you stayed connected to those commands, and we talked in December, and you don't have to share the numbers, because I don't know if they're public, but about how many guys have taken their own lives in the military, and particularly in special operations, and drilling down even more into these top tier units. But it was astounding, that number that you shared with me. I mean, for those guys, and 20 years at war will do a couple things to you, especially when you're doing the things that you did. Where do you point guys when they call you? Like for other people that are out there that are, maybe they're doing well, or maybe it looks like they're doing well, and a friend reaches out who is struggling, and okay, now we're back in it. And you're having this one-on-one conversation, or maybe it's a text, or maybe it's a friend of a friend that says, hey, so-and-so is not doing well. I don't know what to do. Where do you point them? What do you, each situation being a little bit different, obviously, or maybe a lot different. But where do you point those guys, or their family members who are reaching out, or their friends that are reaching out saying, hey, so-and-so needs some help right now, and I don't know what to do. And they know that you're that guy who cares so deeply while you're in and on the outside now. Where do you point people?
Yeah, I'd say if you're at that spot where you've reached the bottom of the pit, so to speak, and it's just all you see is darkness. What I would say to you, and what I say to my brothers and sisters that reach out when they're struggling, is that whatever you believe in, God, the universe, I think it's all the same thing, right? Like this higher power out there. What I've seen in life spiritually is that always on the other side of the darkest dark is the brightest bright. Like you just got to hang in there. And it's easier said than done. Like I said earlier, it takes constant daily effort to get to a place of wellness. And dude, I struggle every day with that. There's times where, the frustrations of like right now in a capital raise for one of the projects that I'm so passionate about, I think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? But investors, they might not think that. So you get really frustrated and with the lack of, for me, I feel like I'm being forced to operate at a level so far below my potential because I'm not capitally capable of doing the things I want to do the way I want to do them, right? And so you're like, that's my hardship now, along with like the physical stuff. So there's plenty of days where I'm angry, I'm pissed. Like I joke with friends, like, man, I miss war, but you just gotta, just like you did in your training, you just gotta show up every day. And so typically when guys reach out, first, I just want to make sure that they're not a danger to themselves or someone else. Like if I get those calls, I drop everything and I am there. And again, I never got to the spot where I was like proactively planning my demise, right? But I certainly have experienced enough pain, physical pain, where I've laid down to try to sleep, and I'm like, God, if I don't wake up tomorrow, I'm cool with that. Like this hurts. But even if you get to that spot, you're close, right? Like that's you should reach out and talk to your buddies, and not, most of us do it flippantly. Like and I'm sure you've experienced it before too, but you'll get these cries for help that are like, hey man, how you doing? The flippant answer is like, oh man, I'm good. How about you? I don't know, man. I'm hanging in there. Like, I'm having some bad days, and okay, cool, man. Maybe I'll see you around town. And like, we just breeze past it. But whenever those things come up in conversation, I would say, one, to anyone that's listening, like dig in a little bit, make sure your buddy, your friend, your family member, whoever is truly okay. You can't be afraid to ask hard or uncomfortable questions, because the alternative is regretting never asking those hard, uncomfortable questions down the road. Tragic, if it takes that tragic turn. So don't be afraid to have conversations that may be uncomfortable. And if someone does say that, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore, like I'm not having fun anymore, I want off this ride, and I think I'm going to end my life. One, obviously, there's you can go straight to any emergency room and get checked in and go down the mental health pathway. But then there's also just a number of suicide hotlines. Jump in your phone and Google. There are a number of them: county specific, state specific, nationally specific, veteran specific. You name it. There's a group out there. And at least you can get on the phone to talk to somebody. Because what I notice that most people struggle with is they get to the position of true despair, where they're considering taking their life. And even though they might have a home with a wife and kids, or a close group of friends or teammates, they feel alone. Because one, we're creatures of always moving forward. And, like, I'm trained where if my arms and legs are gone and all I got left to do is roll towards the bad guy, like that's what I'm going to do. Right. And so we were always try to push forward through those tough things. And we don't ever want to bog other people down with the things that are bothering us, right? Because I know, like, I don't want to complain to my buddy that my back is hurting and my legs are hurting, because I know he's hurting too, so just keep yourself. And with the sensitivities around mental health, it gets even more, touchy, if you will, to have those conversations, because one, if you're active, you don't want anyone thinking like, I'm going to lose my job now if I say that I'm having, concerns about my well-being. When in hindsight, or looking from a much bigger picture, the job is great. I'm the last one to tell you to throw your career away. But ultimately, your health and well-being and your family and your presence in this world is far more important than any of that other stuff. Like, and if you're not good, you're not going to do that job to the best of your ability anyway. So if you truly care about that job and your teammates, then you got to say something. And then obviously for the retired guys, I know it's tough, man, that, getting healthcare in a expedient manner to address real significant pain is tough. And you get to those spots where you feel horrible and alone. You start walking around like you're the dark cloud in your house. I know of friends and not myself. Like, there's times where I've been hurting physically so bad that ultimately, like, mentally, you start suffering as well, because you're like, how can all this pain, how can this be possible to hurt like this and not have everyone take me seriously? You get to a point where even your own family doesn't know how to help you, so they avoid you. And so if you are feeling alone, like, call a hotline, call a friend, reach out to somebody, and don't dance around the bush. Like, tell them straight up, I am having a tough time. I'm struggling. Can I meet you for coffee, breakfast, whatever? And ultimately, what you want to find are partners that will keep you accountable, right? Like, buddies that aren't going to be, I have friends, like, I'll call guys after they've taken care of themselves and they've done the right things, or like, we are the worst jokesters there are. Like, we're blunt. Other people will hear our comedy and be like, oh my God, what is the matter with you people? But I'll call guys and, joking around, but it's straight to the point. Like, hey man, just calling to make sure, like, you staying away from the booze, you're not screwing around, or you're like, blah, 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 make sure mentally they're good. And just, you got to reach out. You got to let people know you're hurting. Then you got to do the things you need to do every day to ensure that you're taking care of yourself, because if you're not good, you're not good for anybody. You got to take care of yourself, and then have people around you that will keep you accountable.
Yeah, man. And did you have a plan when you were getting out? Like, did you take any time to come up with a plan? And if you did, is that plan, are you still on that path? Because you've done so much stuff over the last couple of years, it's hard for me to keep track. What are you up to now? Or what was your plan getting out? Like, what were you going to step into? And then what have you moved on to from there?
So when I was towards the tail end of my career and going through the medical retirement process, for me, one of the things I had been involved in for a number of years before that was on the charitable side, steering people that I knew that could potentially be donors to support these things, or just really benevolent people that wanted to give back or wanted to help guys and their families that were struggling. And so the charitable side of things really interested me. And then, aside from my primary role of being the medic for the guys and gals I supported, I was also lucky enough to have some really fun side jobs. Like, I was the avalanche guy, so I got to ski a bunch, and I was the high water rescue guy, so I got to learn how to drive jet skis and surf in Hawaii and all that great stuff. The other thing that I was really fortunate enough to be a part of was a lot of the human performance and canine performance, a lot of the research that SOCOM was doing that the command had any purview in. And so I knew that because of a lot of the technologies that I was seeing that were on the bleeding edge of human performance, or just wellness, general wellness or recovery, and the fact that there's such a lack of those things on the outside, and obviously, to be fair, there are plenty of amazing centers all over the place, but they're all just missing a couple pieces. And so I was like, man, I want to build a ranch, Idaho, Montana, somewhere just big and beautiful and wild, where guys can hunt and fish and archery and do those things that are good for them, but also build a place that had all the components that I thought would truly be beneficial to these men and women and their families healing. And then ultimately get to a place where, aside from military, we're also taking care of law enforcement folks. And, so like, I want to continue to serve. It's in my DNA. Obviously what I want to do is a bit beyond what I'm capable of financially. So I was like, okay, before I could build that place and ultimately have centers around the country, I need to understand how to raise money, how these businesses get capitalized, and the whole that side of it. And so obviously, Andrew was gracious enough, your good buddy, to give me a purview into the world of investment banking and just listen and learn and watch their meetings and be part of them. And I just absorb information. And, eventually I knew, okay, there's other things I want to do to get to that point where I can build that ranch. I want to have a line of health and wellness and human performance products that are anchored in clinical work and have a robust scientific advantage to delivering whatever nutrients or molecules I want to better people's lives. And so that was the first thing. That's Seven Sages Health, which is the company I'm trying to do the next raise for right now. And then because my first significant injury was on one of our death boats, I got smashed between a HSAC and a Navy ship that we were assaulting for training. And that was the first time
on the ladder, like a swell went up and got you.
So, well, we had finished the hit on the ship, and so they put down like this big, massive like net ladder down one side, and then we still had a caving ladder attached to the leeward side. And so I was with my guys on that side. And so I was bottom man on the ladder, and it was at night, and like out of a bad movie, it's it's raining sideways and the seas are horrendous. And I'm like, I can hear the Flight of the Valkyries in my head. And, it's like, dun, 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 dun. And I'm just like, oh man, what are we doing? So anyway, I'm bottom guy on the ladder, and the guys in the HSAC or like our speedboat, when they rise to like the highest point, they'll put an IR light on the, like, don't go below this point on the ladder, essentially, because bad things happen past it, right? You'll be between two boats. And so I'm like a couple rungs above the ladder, and it was actually Adam Brown was above me, and I'm looking for the boat, and I saw it coming under me, and then I just see this big explosion of water, and I thought it got rolled under the ship, but it had squirted out off this big convergence of wave that hit. And so I was like, oh crap, the boat's gone. And then above me, he yells like, watch your legs, and so I look out to the side, and it's with nods. And so it's everything's like kind of whited out because of all the rain. And now the Navy ship has turned on all the lights, so it's hard to see, but I see like the HSAC coming at me. And so I just dropped off. I just grabbed my gun and dropped off the ladder, thinking like I got a better chance with the blendy thing in the back of this big boat than being between these two things. And unfortunately, I landed in like a seated position in the back of the HSAC, and the HSAC also has like these bolsters that we all lean against. You're standing in the back of that thing, and my right arm had hit that thing when I went into the boat, and I was like, I just broke my arm. That's what and then my legs were just like on fire. So I knew, because I had landed in a seated way, that I had done something. But it was kind of funny. I land in the boat seated. The boat hits the Navy ship. I hit the Navy ship with my head. And then like as we go up, we scooped 5 more dudes off the ladder, and we're laying there in a pile in the back of this boat. And we had 2 CAG guys with us because we were doing a BAF and a half or a helicopter and a boat assault. And so these 2 Delta guys were like, I've never been on a boat. Like, I'll come on that speedboat thing with you guys. And so I'm like face to face with this guy. He's like, you're the doc, right? And like we're laughing and giggling like kids, like we're alive. And I was like, yeah, man. He goes, I think I broke my arm. I was like, man, I'll check you when everybody gets up. And so like we're unassing ourselves. And I went to stand up and I just flopped over. And I was like, holy crap, I'm paralyzed. And then as the medic, like I'm going through, what are the things? So first off, I'm like, guys, drag me to the back corner of the boat because there's more guys on the ladder. We need to get more guys off. And so while that was happening, I started to get some feeling back in my right leg, and my left leg was just haywire. So I'm like, okay, I probably either have some type of burst fracture or I've herniated a bunch of discs, and I either have X, Y, or Z. And then ultimately, by the time we got to shore, I was like, I need to get to a hospital right now. I'm pretty sure I have cauda equina syndrome. because I could feel my bladder was distending and I could not go to the bathroom. So I was like, get me to surgery. So that was the first one. But anyway, because of that experience, it was always in the back of my mind, just in riding on those boats. And I know you've tasted that pleasure too. It is the most violent freight train you've ever been on. Credit to the guys, the SWIC guys that drive those boats are incredible maritime operators. I mean, they're unbelievable. But with these big rigid boats and rough seas and guys like you in charge always saying like, hey, it's horrible weather. It's a great time to train, like
training weather.
Yeah, exactly. It's training weather because this is when bad guys hunker down. Everybody hunkers down. So we're gonna own this bad weather time and go out there and train. And so I was just always like, man, these boats are horrible. There's so many of my buddies that are, like we joke, they're an inch shorter, and SWIC guys have like so many orthopedic injuries, especially to their lower limbs and pelvis. And so I was like, man, their spine. There's got to be a better boat. And so that's the other company I'm part of. That's Foil Cat. And that's a foil assisted power catamaran. And, two projects I'm really passionate about that hopefully will get me to the ability to build that ranch.
That is awesome. Have you built those boats yet? I was looking at them earlier. Yeah. So there's a couple of them out there. Or what's that look like right now?
Yeah, so we had a 24-foot boat that my buddy and co-founder Todd developed a while back with a company called Melvin and Morelli, who you may have heard through the America's Cup scene in your time with Larry and Jimmy and all those guys. That they are one of the firms that design a lot of those foiling boats. And so we went to them, or Todd went to them with seeing if we could put a foil in a boat. And so he had, like you mentioned, the protector and those aren't far behind our HSACs. They ride horribly. Sorry, protector. Cool boats, but just, like most boats, they smash the heck out of the folks that are on there, and they're not that great fuel wise. And so we had been experimenting with other boats, and Todd had gone on a powered catamaran, an offshore fishing boat, and the ride was way better with the cat. So that's what got us going down that pathway of a foil assisted cat, which Melvin and Morelli was considering and working on at the time as well. So we partnered with them. Designed essentially an offshore racing catamaran, a stepped hull boat, super fast on its own, and then put a foil in there to further enhance the ride. And so now we get really amazing fuel efficiency, but most importantly to me, obviously for my spinal reasons, it rides like butter through the water, man. It's awesome. So we have that, and then a bigger 35-foot boat. And then I've been working, obviously, with some of the folks from our old world on seeing if we can tailor an application to the military and law enforcement.
So now that you've been out for a few years now, what lessons have you learned, and what do you pass on to guys that are about to get out, that come to you and are like, hey, man, I'm about to get out. I want to do X, Y, or Z, or, hey, I'm getting out. I have no idea what I'm going to do next. I guess I'll contract for a little bit or whatever. Like, what advice do you pass along to guys that are transitioning? And usually this advice is good for people transitioning from anything in life. It doesn't have to be military special operations. It can be from anything. It can be from a job into a new job, or from from a death of a loved one, or a divorce, or any transition in life. But having now done this, and I know you've dabbled in a bunch of different things, I'm sure you have a ton of lessons learned that I hope you are writing down. But what do you pass on to the guys that are getting ready to get out and start that next chapter in life?
I would say slow your roll. For me, I knew that with all of the physical damage that my body has endured, and obviously the mental, emotional things, I'm blessed. I feel like I'm in such a a good place, albeit sometimes really tough. But I knew that I'm getting out at my mid 40s, and the things I want to accomplish, like eventually I want to have more time with my wife and kids. But my goal of building these places to care for people is supremely important, because I think it's up to us to take care of ourselves, because the government is just going to mess up
what
eventually anything, with loads of bureaucracy and red tape, and it takes forever to, on and on and on. Right. So I'm like, if we're going to do it, we got to do it ourselves. And so I thought, building that ranch or these healing centers is critical to not only my well-being, but to try to do everything I can to continue to serve others. I feel like without service in my life, it's not as rich. I albeit sometimes it's annoying. I still got buddies that, they'll call me at 2 a.m, like, yo, dude, I just got in a scrap at a fight. Can you at a bar, can you come stitch up my face? Like, okay. So, I need some avenue to care and help for others, because it's just in my bones, it's in my DNA. But with that too, like, I feel like I'm on a shortened timeline. Here I am. I don't want to be working. I'll probably work forever on something. Like, I got to be doing something, but not with as much time and bandwidth as is required right now. So I'm like, okay, I got like 10 to 15 years of really hardcore grind left in me. And I'm going to do everything I can in this shortened timeline and try to learn from great people like, Andrew and all the other folks that I've been blessed to meet, Kevin and Jimmy. I mean, like, there's so many amazing guys that, thanks to being asked to come help on the first event in support of your family, getting to meet a lot of those guys. So thanks to you. But, I'm a sponge, right? I got 2 eyes and 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So I'm just going to absorb as much information as possible and do my best to build, companies that provide value to people and shareholders. Now, to answer your question, now that I've said all that, is like, I came out of the gate hot and like, I didn't slow down at all. And I think in hindsight, I really should have. I should have definitely taken some time to lick some wounds and make sure I got all the surgeries I needed done, because, now here I am into, this business stuff, and, I just don't have time to do those things right now. I will find the time, but right now, like, lengthy recoveries are just anathema to what I'm trying to accomplish and the time I'm trying to spend with my family. I mean, right? So I would say slow down and set some really strong left and right lateral limits for yourself, some guideposts. And it was actually your advice, a few years back. We had spoken once, and I was lamenting with, like, man, how do you find the time? Like, you are punching out books and you're doing all this amazing stuff. And you shared with me something I think was very poignant, which I think would benefit anyone listening, in that you need to, if you can set those limits for yourself of what you're willing to do and won't do. And you had mentioned to me, because I was talking about the time away from family, you had said, hey, listen, man, like, if you're getting called to go on a work trip that's 2 weeks, like, put down on a piece of paper this checklist of, like, I'm not going to take any job that has me away from my family for more than 3 days. I'm not going to say yes to anything that does X, Y, or Z. And after I wrote down those limits for myself, like, what am I willing to do and not do? It became so much easier to say no to people, because, I'm a yes guy. Like, if someone calls me and says, hey, I need help, I'm there. And that is not always a good thing, because a lot of times my own personal needs or like my mental well-being or physical well-being always will take a back seat if I feel that someone else, because again, I know what those things feel like. And I don't know, obviously someone else's mental capacity to forge through and continue fighting through some of those things, and knowing the guys that do call and reach out that are struggling, if that guy's calling me and he's saying those things, like, I got to get there now, And so I would say, take a step back, really assess what it is that you want to accomplish. What are the things that are out there that are important to you that you need to get done, or that you want to achieve or get done? And then balance those things with your family or your personal time, surgeries you need, adventures you want to go on. Like, I think about Dinger and, rowing across the Atlantic and biking around Thailand. And like, I'm like, man, that's so amazing. I could do that too. I just don't make the time for it. So, I take that back. I don't know that I drove across the
that was pretty legit. Ocean. Solo.
Dinger is a wild
solo
man.
Unsupported.
Kudos
Northern route.
Yes. Unsupported. Insane. Anyway, if anyone doesn't know who Dave Dinger Bell is, go check his I think his thing is NK to UK solo or something like that. Check him out, man. Amazing guy. But anyway, take the time to really understand what it is that you want out of life in this new chapter. because there's a whole bunch of things like I talked about earlier. Those bills are going to come due. And for me, obviously there was the physical stuff, but then there was the new dynamic I found out with the family, where when I was at the command and I'm traveling, 300 days a year for years and years on end, I was having to go to those places, right? So it wasn't like it was ever held against me that I was gone all the time.
Right.
Kudos to my wife, because I know plenty of buddies and wives that, everyone's different, right? So, but I know plenty of guys that struggled because their wives were like, dude, enough of this. Like, I'm done, and the tensions I saw there. I always felt bad for those guys and tried to empathize, but I just couldn't because I wasn't going through it. And lo and behold, once I'm civilian, Elias, my wife was like, one day she was like, yo, dude, now you're choosing to be gone all the time. Like, what is going on here? And so that was what led to a conversation with you and, essentially stepping back. And I really shut down a lot of the stuff, like I was spending so much time out in LA. I was like, one, that place is not good for my soul. I just, it's sad to see what's become in some of the places out there. But I just was, I was spending more time out there focused on business stuff and trying to learn when I should have, been home with my wife and kids. And so that's been great. And obviously with the COVID and all the silliness over the last few years, like I've been afforded even more time with my family. So I'm super blessed and thankful for that. But, really step back and analyze what it is you want to do. Talk to other guys and gals that have walked in your shoes and ask them, because unfortunately, most people don't come back and share and say, hey, bro, just FYI, here's some of the things that you might experience when you get out. It's like we all learn by fire, right? And so seek out guys that have left, because what I would say, just my own experience coming from special operations, what I would imagine, thinking about, again, about some of the guys we know, but that come out of the NFL or, it's a real far fall from the top, if you will, where you feel like you've finally achieved the pinnacle, all your dreams, all these things you've worked so hard for. And now, not that I was special before, but now I'm just like every, Joe Schmo walking on the street. And so when you lose that mission, right? Or for me, when I no longer had that purpose, to be part of that machine and go execute goals wherever they were, it was tough, man. Like my head was spinning for quite a while, because I'm like, man, what's my reason now, aside from, being involved in all the charitable things and helping guys when they call. But other than that, what am I doing? To always first and foremost is like, how am I bettering my kids and my wife's future? How can I impact the world positively so that my kids are left with a better place than I had? That's a mission that's always there, inherent to any parent, right? But for me personally, I was like, man, what am I going to do now? And so I always knew I wanted to build that ranch or those centers where we really take care of folks. And there's some guys that are doing great things. And I think, man, I'm going to, get these people together and these people. And so I just refocused on what it was I want to do. But I would say, take your time, talk to other people, and make sure you know what you're willing to do and won't do in this new phase of life. And it'll sort itself out. You've been through worse.
Yeah, no, it's about that mission and that passion. And then, putting those two together, mating those two together.
Yeah.
And really true believer, that second novel is really about my character, James Reese, finding that next mission in life, that passion in life. And then of course, once he finds it, they pull him back in, of course, for the good of the story and the narrative. But yeah.
And introducing his best friend in that book.
Yeah.
Who has a very similar story to somebody I know.
Well, in Savage Son, I mean, you're like I'm like taking notes on all that stuff, and you're woven right in there, that finding that passion, I think, guys, because the mission and the passion are both so clear in the military, particularly in special operations. Your mission, and that's your passion, like both. Bam, together. And then when you get out, you kind of, those things, maybe they're not the same, or maybe you don't know what they are. What are you passionate about? What's your mission in life as you make this transition, whether it's from the NFL or being Olympic skier or whatever it might be, or the military. And it can be anything really, but I was very lucky in that my passion was writing. I knew that that was clear, and my mission was taking care of my family. So my job then becomes to put those together. How do I mate those two together moving forward? So I was very lucky that that was very clear to me as I transitioned, or well before I transitioned out of the military, and then figuring out those things because there were a lot of options out there, and being able to figure out just because of how much time it takes to sift through with the family. So every time an option came in as we're getting out, maybe it wasn't writing, maybe it was a backup, a contingency, or an option. Well, rather than wasting 3 hours talking about it and thinking about, well, we have to move to city X or Y or whatever it might be. Hey, where would we go? Where would we live? The kids in school. Well, if you already have those things, those left and right limits, like for me, it was about freedom. Like I'd been focused on that mission for so long. Now it's time to explore a little bit of this freedom, moving on into this next chapter in life. So freedom being maintaining my own schedule, and then financial. So if something hit the financial side of the house, which many options did, but didn't let me control my schedule, instant no. Now I've wasted no other time thinking about where I have to move. Do I have to go get some qualification here? That okay, I guess I could do that. Already a no. I've already saved all that bandwidth and put that back into the novel, into that passion of writing. So I think that really does help, guys. Putting those left and right limits also helps to be clear on what you want to do next. But sometimes it takes a
Yeah,
little while
that's
for people that
awesome.
don't know that yet. And then where did this? I'm so excited that you're exploring writing, particularly children's books, because I get questions all the time about, hey, what should my kids be reading? I put these reading lists out, but it's almost exclusively focused on an adult audience, and by that I mean anybody, depending on reading level, from like fifth grade onward, into the way as far as you want to go. But I'm so glad that you're exploring writing something with lessons and imparting those to this next generation, your children, my children. And where did that passion come from, and what stage are you in? Without
Yeah.
giving away too
So
many secrets, I don't want to give away your secrets here. Okay.
no, 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 we can't. There are some great books out there. Obviously, parents are hungry for information, and you can find tons of books. And obviously, guys from our world have written, like you think of Jocko and plug for him, Where the
Yeah.
Warrior Kid. Like those are some great books that get kids thinking, and that allow the parents and kids to have really constructive
Yeah.
conversations about what it is they're reading. And so, along a similar vein, I always had these discussions. I'm a big fan. I know you just had Ryan on Holiday. I'm a big fan of Stoic philosophy. I always have been. And I think it gets a poor light shed on it when people misuse the term, like, oh, you're so
Mm.
stoic. People think that's like angry or mad or whatever. But it's a really balanced way, I feel, of approaching things, and also being able to control your emotions, especially when you read the writings of Marcus Aurelius and the lessons there. And so I was always looking for ways to impart some of that stoicism in my children from a very young age. And part of that was with an ethos, right? You think ethos, pathos, logos, all those things. Ethos being your character, who you are. And so I developed this little, this ethos, almost a little, poem, if you will, that I would say. Like I would be holding this little baby and I would say it. And when they were old enough to talk, and still to this day, my daughter is now 14, my son 11, every night before bed, I hear their ethos and we pray, and off the bed they go. And it's really awesome to hear when they share mindset lessons with their
Mm.
friends or each other. Like we have this, it's more of a fun thing, but there's this rule in this house where you do not say can't. And if you say the word can't, like I can't do that, it's an immediate physical reprimand, right? So it's like, what do you want to do? You want squats? You want jumping jacks? You want push-ups? So I love when they call each other like, oh, you just said it. You just said can't. And he's like, you just
You
said
did
it too.
too.
Why don't say it?
That's great.
So it's great to hear them, understand those lessons. And now as they're older, it's allowed us to have really, really constructive conversations about what's going on in the world, what my opinion is based on facts. Like I'm a big believer, like base your opinion on facts, not emotion, right? And so again, coming from a place of stoicism, to see the kids do that, it's just helped guide them through what I can't imagine what school must be like these days with some of the stuff that they come home, talking about, or that a teacher has said, or some other kid. And it's almost like, and not to disparage, there's some great teachers out there, and not to disparage the, public schools or private schools or any of that, but it's almost like kids today, they're being shaped into these angry little activists looking for something to say, like, oh, that's offensive, that's this and that. And like, so many people are quick to point out something that's offending them, or whatever it might be. And there's validity to some things, right? Like, for us as a population to advance and continue moving society forward in the right direction. But a lot of it is just, it's people that take advantage of the benevolence and kindness of and compassion of people. And then they're just arsonists, right? Whether it's like they're a racial arsonist, or, sexuality, or whatever it is that they're going to, get on top. So anyway, with Stoicism as a background in some of these lessons, it's been really amazing to see my kids handle these situations in really like grown-up ways. And not that most grown-ups are too great these days, but to hear them have conversations with each other, or come to me with things, discuss, it all falls back to ethos. And so the pillars of the ethos I made, I won't say the little thing, because I want some people to
save it for the book. Yeah.
Save it for the book. I'm learning from the master here, Jack. But, we say this little thing, and each of the lines has a thing, whether it's a physical, each of them has a mental, and if it, like, for example, strong has both mental and physical, traits there. And so in the book, there's one that's been written already and illustrated. I'm thankful that my wife's uncle is an amazing illustrator. And I asked him, like, hey man, I'd love for you to work on this project with me. And so we did like a kids flip book with the ethos that I say with my kids. And then at the back, there's some topics that parents can maybe discuss with their young readers as they age a little bit. And then there's in development right now, what I'm writing is like more of the young reader series, where each of those traits of the ethos, like, again, using strong as an example, is what is that? What does that mean? And it's not about, like I always say to the kids, like, earn your title today, which is warrior. And it's not about being a fighter, right? It's like the old, what is a Japanese proverb where it's like, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war, right? So aside from training my children to be physically strong, it's also mentally strong, right? So this whole series of books is just, I think it's important that kids now more than ever develop some mental armor, because the world is a uncertain and crazy place. And there's so many, they look at adults, much like I looked at that recruiter in the beginning, like, yeah, sure, buddy, whatever you say, I'll go do. And so they got a question like, man, if my own children are saying, my teacher said this, or, I was watching the TV and, some politician or movie star or athlete came on and they said this, and that just doesn't make sense, and this and that. It's like they're getting constantly bombarded with information more than we did. And you think about the reach of the phone, right? The cell phone, you have the entirety of human knowledge in your hand, which is awesome. But you also have an electronic leash that's always with you, that you can always get bullied on. And, like, they can't escape things like we used to as kids. Like, if I was dealing with bullies at school, I knew, man, when I get home, I'm getting on my dirt bike with my buddies and I'm going to disappear into the woods. No one's going to bother me. Now, kids it's like constant barrage. So I just felt it was important that they develop something to share some of the lessons that have served me in my life. And, if it impacts one kid, then it's a win.
That's awesome, man. I can't wait to see those on shelves. And someone was on this podcast over the summer, and someone heard it. And now the book that we talked about is going to be published. I don't want to say who it was or what it is, because, who knows along the way what can, all sorts of things can happen. But I'm looking forward to seeing that out there. And so looking forward to seeing yours. I think it's going to be a huge benefit to kids and their families. And you spent so much time with me. I'm so sincerely appreciative. And as you'll see here, like, usually I have a lot of notes written down. And what I love having buddies on is because it makes it zero notes. So I love that. Nice. Zero prep for this one. And I just always love talking to you. Always learn so much by being in your presence. And I sincerely appreciate everything that you have done for me personally, for my family, and obviously for the entire community from which we came. But looking forward, man, what gives you hope? I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. I know you are a patriot. You're a student of history. You've seen so much in the military, and now you've made this transition to the private sector. What gives you hope for the future? Because there's a lot going on, obviously, in our country and in the world. And we touched on it in the beginning, that appreciation of being able to live in a country where you can make your own decisions and live with those consequences of those decisions and forge your own path, learn from your mistakes, rise back up if you've been knocked down. And really, I mean, that's the land of opportunity for a reason. It's called that for a reason. And it seems like from within, we are taking some of those away now. And so, what gives you, when you think about where we are as a nation and where we're going as a nation, are you hopeful?
There's a whole other podcast, bro.
Maybe we'll save that one for when we have the books out.
No, I'll say this. Absolutely. I think, the majority of people around the world, just like we saw overseas, like there's plenty of folks in the places we were at that just want to have a good life with their kids and their family and friends and not be bothered, right? Essentially, that's what all humans want. We want our basic needs met: food, shelter, and love, safety. And so, I think more and more people are waking up to the ills of whether it's politicians or the media or, Hollywood or athletes, and not just here, but around the world. And right now we have some, obviously weak leadership here in the country, but also overseas. And I think for the longest time, and we can certainly get into a discussion another time, but I think if you look at the way that some of the political parties operate, it's not to bring us together. It's to keep us fighting, right? You think about you hear about the old science experiment of, scientists putting a glass jar with all different colored ants, and he sits it on the desk there and watches, and the ants happily march and crawl around each other, and no one's, going at it. But if the researcher shakes the jar, it's mayhem, and everyone starts, or all the ants just literally start attacking anything that they can get their pincers on. So we got to ask ourselves, like, we're in the jar right now. Who is shaking it and why? And just be wise and able to look at what is truly happening right now, even if it goes against what you believe, even if your side may be potentially responsible for what's happening, because the future of this country and the world is at stake. I don't think people truly understand how much the world needs a strong America. And we here in this country, like you said, people take it so for granted. I know how amazing this place is compared to the rest of the world. And dude, if I was, in Australia, I would hope that the guy sitting in Australia or France or Germany or wherever feels the same way about their country as I do about mine, because that's how we save this thing. Ultimately, humans, the reason why we've come so far is because we can cooperate. We need to get back to cooperation. We need to get back to a place where we can talk with each other. We need to get back to a place where we can question things without being deplatformed and silenced and have your jobs and your lives ruined, So I think aside from some of the political clown show that we've seen over the last couple of years, I think people are waking up to, hey man, some things need to change, whether it's with the government or big pharma or how beholden we are to any one party. I would almost urge people, like, don't assign yourself a label. Labels are nothing. They are not who you are. And today, most people, that's what they wanted. They want to hang some label on themselves. I'm black, I'm white, I'm gay, I'm trans, I'm straight, I'm whatever. No, we're all human beings. We are all connected. We are all in this together. And right now, it's almost like we're all on a plane and unfortunately for us, Biden's our pilot. I don't want that guy to crash. Like, get it together and start making some things happen that's actually good for us. Like, I'm not a fan, but I'm rooting for the guy because my family depends on it. All of us depend on it. The world depends on us coming together. So I would just say to people, man, like, open your eyes and ears, listen to other people before you speak, try to hear and understand what they're saying, try to maybe understand why people think differently than you. And maybe you'll learn some things, or potentially maybe you'll share some things that they'll learn from that. Then we can go together, into the future. So I'm hopeful, man. I think, most people want the same thing I do. I want to be able to do whatever the hell I want to do, whenever I want to do it with my kid. Like, I want to go out to the mountains with my kids and go here and go there. And I don't want anyone telling me what I can and can't do. I don't think anybody does, right? So I would just urge people, like, instead of hanging a label on yourself, like, I don't want to be labeled as a Republican or a Democrat. Like, let the politicians hang labels on their heads. We should all be voting for what's best for our children and what's best for our country.
Love it, brother. Love it, man. Thank you so much for spending so much time. I sincerely appreciate it. I hope I get to see you in person soon. Maybe get you out here, or maybe I'll pass through Old Bob Beach one of these days. But man, thank you so much for everything. Please give my best to the family, and man, best wishes going forward. I'm always here for you, brother.
Same to you, man. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always fun to catch up with you. I will definitely be out there. I'm actually working on finishing up my private pilot so I can get into flying some bush planes.
This is what I was talking about. There's always something going on that I don't know what you're doing. Like,
hey man, I got to touch the dragon, bro. I got to touch the dragon. Something's got to get my blood pumping. But I appreciate it, brother, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Sounds great.
You take care. 10,000. My workout gear and apparel of choice. Why? Because they are the best. And I've used a lot of workout gear over the years, a lot of shorts, a lot of shirts, and 10,000 sure stands out. This Father's Day, if you're looking for that gift to give dad, well, if you want him to get back in shape, a little inspiration perhaps, well, 10,000 is the gear of choice. I've been using their 7-inch interval short and their versatile short. Those are some of the most popular styles. Perfect for the gym, even spinning, if that's your thing. Runs, high-intensity workouts, backyard workouts, doesn't matter. It is super comfortable. Absolutely love it. And lightweight, breathable, durable, and they sure tested this stuff out. So no matter what you're doing, running to Olympic lifting to boxing, you can find gear, shorts, apparel, whatever you're looking for that is top of the line. And I love that they have this motto of being better than yesterday, because it harkens back to earning your trident every day, to being the best operator and leader you can possibly be, always being better than yesterday. So I love that that is in their mission statement. Continuous improvement, not overnight success. Continuous improvement. They have a team of over 200 athletes who have tested their gear to ensure these designs, fabrics, trims, and fit are just top of the line and awesome. They have free shipping and free returns and a lifetime guarantee. 10,000 is offering our listeners 15% off your purchase. Go to 10,000.cc/dangerclose to receive 15% off your purchase. That is 10,000.cc/dangerclose. I want to thank my friends at Black Rifle Coffee for sponsoring the Danger Close podcast. I've been a huge fan for the longest time. Drink Black Rifle Coffee every day. And if you keep your eyes peeled, you will notice that perhaps Chris Pratt is wearing a Black Rifle Coffee t-shirt, not unsimilar to this one, in the Amazon series adaptation of The Terminal List. Now you can go to blackriflecoffee.com/dangerclose and use code DangerClose20 at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Black Rifle Coffee, America's coffee. Keep crushing. Thank you so much to SIG Sauer for jumping right on board out of the gate to make this podcast possible. Obviously, I am a huge SIG fan, having carried the P226 on every deployment downrange in the SEAL teams. But SIG was a supporter. They were friends well before I was a New York Times bestselling author, well before I even had an Instagram account or any social media presence whatsoever. So thank you guys all so much. Ron, Tom, Jason, everybody at SIG who gets up every day and continues to crush it and lead the way. SIG is always adapting. They're always at the forefront, whether it is firearms for citizens, whether it's firearms for our military, ammo, suppressors, optics, training, fire control units. They are doing it all, and they are always pushing that envelope and trying to do it better each and every day through innovation and adaptation. They crush. So thank you so much for that friendship and support. It will never be forgotten. Welcome to the gear highlight portion of the Danger Close podcast. Now, what do I have here? Just got back from a trip to Argentina in the Patagonia region. And of course, I brought down my Binos. These are the Swarovski EL range 10x42s that my wife got me for my retirement ceremony. Love these Binos right here with rangefinders. Awesome. And this is my Sitka Bino harness that I have been using for quite some time. And Josh Smith at Montana Knife Company sent me out this new blade. And it is awesome. And I was trying to figure out where to carry it. And I put it right here, and it stayed right there on my Bino harness the entire time. And man, I love this blade. This is awesome. So Josh, thank you so much for sending it. Love what you're doing out there at Montana Knife Company. And man, I love this orange. This is a great blade. And if you want one, be sure to follow Montana Knife Company on Instagram. Check out their website. Sign up for their newsletter, because that's when you find out when these blades are dropping. And when they drop, they sell out immediately. So get on that website, sign up for their newsletter. And Josh, thank you so much for this blade. I love it. Thank you for tuning in to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. To connect with Eli, you can follow him on Instagram at Deep Sea Surf, or you can email him directly at Eli, that's ELI, at 7sageshealth.com. SEVENSAGESHEALTH.com. If you enjoyed that conversation, be sure and leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. Sincerely appreciate the support. Take care out there. Be safe. Stay strong. Keep fighting.